perished on Earth, consumed by relentless exhaustion, only to awaken in a new existence. This unexpected rebirth was not as grim as it first appeared. He opened his eyes in a realm of sorcery, reborn as the heir of a mighty duke from the kingdom of Lionheart. From the earliest days, destiny had carved out the path of knighthood for him. Under the guidance of none other than the fabled Holy Knight, Sir Gordek, Lion's journey truly began. This encounter would alter the entire course of his life. Years slipped away in relentless training and daily discipline, with no retreat ever allowed. Every drop of sweat and effort was poured toward a single purpose: to earn the goddess's blessing. That divine favor was the only gateway to attaining the rank of Holy Knight. So Lion built his reputation, aiding the people and awaiting the moment the goddess would reveal herself. That moment finally came when he reached his 20th year. She entrusted him with a trial to prove both his devotion and his valor. He succeeded and was anointed as a holy knight. Yet the true battle had only just begun. One after another, he cut down the monstrous hordes. In that endless storm of blood and chaos, Lion discovered what it meant to feel alive. When the old king fell in combat, the goddess made her decision. Her choice landed upon Lion. He embraced the sacred heart of Lion and pledged to guard the Holy Grail with his very soul. From that day forward, he stood as both monarch and knight. But peace eluded him. War never ceased. Demons, beasts, and darkness itself plagued the land without end. Lion gave everything he had, yet even his unmatched strength could not halt the world's decline. Still, he fought until his last breath, knowing that evil was never so easily undone. And through it all, his faith did not falter. The goddess vowed that she would never abandon him. 3 centuries slipped into history. At long last, Lion struck down the final demon. But something was amiss. Before him stood strangers, figures that seemed to belong to an entirely different reality. Here's the twist. They were people from his first life on Earth. He greeted them with formal dignity. Only then did it become clear. This was the very day he reunited with fellow Earthlings. Exactly 300 years had passed. Before continuing his tale, some context about Earth must be shared. Unlike Lion's war-torn realm, Earth's struggle had taken a different form. 3 decades earlier, portals erupted across the globe. These rifts spewed forth monsters and demons from alien realities. Over time, each gate revealed its own theme and purpose, yet all led to shattered or collapsing worlds. If left unchecked, these gates would flood Earth with horrors. Thus emerged the returnees. Survivors who not only came back alive, but wielded powers so immense, it seemed as if the gods themselves had touched them. Lion was one of these chosen returnees, and now it was time to meet those who stood before him. Kim, the leader of the Korean Demon Hunters Association. Harius, his most trusted lieutenant. They were part of a global legion of hunters tasked with sealing portals. But what they encountered here was unlike anything in their manuals. For Lion had been discovered inside the dreaded Black Gate, the deadliest tier of them all. Within lurked a demon so terrible that most warriors wouldn't dare dream of victory. Yet Lion appeared and felled the monster with a single strike. No doubt remained after that. He had to be recruited. A fighter like him could change the fate of the war. But before any contracts, Kim and Harry faced another problem: bridging the vast cultural divide. Harry, for her part, gazed at Lion with quiet hope. She believed this knight of ancient honor might understand humanity better than they understood themselves. And thus began Lion's new saga. The resurrected king, chosen of the gods, sworn enemy of evil. The slayer of millions of demons had once more set foot on Earth, and his first thought was how far this planet had strayed from faith. Harry was assigned to establish a dialogue with the enigmatic king, but things quickly unraveled. Lion was no ordinary outsider. He embodied the codes of a bygone chivalry. Modern manners appalled him, striking him as shameful and crude. And yes, you may laugh, because a king will always be a king. Above all, Lion longed to understand this strange world. He soon realized that demons, the same insatiable evil, were here as well. Harry devoted herself to her task, persuading him to join the Hunters Association. She promised the Korean government would provide for him in full. But, as expected, Lion added his own condition. To live in this land, he must uphold his knightly vow to fight. If he was to call himself noble, then he would battle. Yet no king could serve beneath another realm's banner. Reluctantly, Harry conceded. Life on Earth proved anything but dull. Almost immediately after Lion's arrival, a new portal erupted near farmland and one of the nation's largest grain depots. Action was required at once, or food production would grind to a halt. Complicating matters, the notorious Phoenix Guild operated nearby, and they certainly had schemes of their own. Lion listened carefully, weighing the seriousness of it all. If the gate broke, the soil would be tainted, and the harvest ruined. It was clear the people could not endure without his aid. On this earth, money and power dictated everything, and guilds exploited crises for profit. The Phoenix Guild was among the worst offenders. They amassed fortunes from gates while evading taxes entirely. This time they refused to close the portal, despite the danger of imminent breach. Lion had no patience for such arrogance. He demanded full clarity of the situation. Thus, he ordered his allies to gather. For the very next day, he would address the matter in person. First, however, a sacred rite had to be performed to purify the land. All requirements were met, and Lion invoked the Mother of Fertile Earth. True magic coursed across the fields, leaving Earthlings awestruck, for the knight knew the goddess Demira herself had descended. There he stood at the heart of the field, sanctified by her presence. He proclaimed the peril they faced. Mankind was not only besieged by demons, but starved of divine guidance. The goddess asked her champion what path he intended to take. Lion vowed to teach humanity and lead them toward righteousness until a new pantheon rose upon this world. Demira joyfully pledged her support, eager for this land to stand as his foundation. Suddenly, a radiant pillar of light split the skies above the fields, and Lion declared that this world would now walk beside the divine. The hunters stared in disbelief at the spectacle. But the Phoenix Guild sought to twist the moment, accusing that the crops had been tainted. Lion was incensed, for the harvest bore the blessing of a goddess. He warned them not to profane her name, reminding that ignorance was forgiven but once. The rice was tested, and every stalk revealed itself to be of rare, exalted grade. Its value was astronomical. The people rejoiced at this miraculous boon. The goddess then announced her task was complete. Lion, in turn, offered boundless thanks to the Earth Mother. She blessed her knight with a promise that he would never know hunger. With the land secured, it was time to venture into the gate. Meanwhile, the Phoenix Guild fumed. Lion's presence had ruined their schemes. Had he not intervened, politicians might have bowed to the guild's demands. Now, however, they would be forced to employ darker tactics. Their leader scoffed that this so-called blessed survivor was nothing in true combat. If so, then the Hunters Association would surely falter. For inside the gate lay horrors beyond reckoning. In brief, a gate could only be sealed once its master was slain and its task fulfilled. Otherwise, its monsters would spill out, poisoning land and slaughtering innocents. Interestingly, Lion relished duels against mighty beasts, but the hunters trembled in dread. Though they had cleared dungeons before, this one seethed with unnatural swarms of the living and the dead. Harry explained that as long as the Overlord endured, the minions would endlessly respawn, making the ordeal nearly insurmountable for their small band. Lion, however, sought only swift victory. Yet the boss was no ordinary foe. It was a Death Rider mounted on a skeletal steed. The Association fighters quaked as countless enemies advanced in unison. Still, surrender was not an option. They fought with all they had, knowing lives hung in the balance. But I won't bore you with every detail of this vast clash. Instead, let us jump to the turning point. Harry pleaded for Lion's aid, but the king dismissed the notion of involving himself in such a petty skirmish. He urged the mortals to find strength and honor within themselves. Unwilling to waste another second, Harry launched herself at the boss. Yet the creature proved cunning and formidable. It easily deflected her assault, but she was only beginning to reveal her gifts. With blazing fire, she cordoned off the beast from its minions and prepared to strike the fatal blow. Then, unexpectedly, someone else entered the fray. Lion, impressed by the demon's prowess, now regarded it as a knight of stature. Thus, he proposed an honorable duel between equals. To his surprise, the demon accepted, but Harry reminded him of a vital truth of this dungeon. The fiend Durkin could not die unless its head was severed. Lion paid no heed. His focus was only on defeating his foe. He formally challenged Durkin, and their duel commenced. The monster struck with tremendous force, but Lion caught the blow effortlessly with one hand. Durkan's first attempt ended in failure. Blow after blow, Lion parried with ease, leaving the hunters gaping in disbelief. His power was undeniable. In that clash, Durkin felt a forgotten thrill, being treated as a true knight. Lion's bearing, his calm mastery, evoked a veteran of countless wars, and his blazing eyes burned with honor and glory. He embodied the very essence of knighthood. The demon longed to cross blades with him again and again. Lion noticed Durkin's style growing more elegant, more layered, as though fragments of his old life resurfaced. In a stunning twist, Durkin offered his crown to Lion. The knight rejoiced, grateful the demon had reclaimed his honor, and vowed to pray for him. With a surge of holy radiance, Lion ended the duel. Even this devil acknowledged the glory of Lion Lionheart. Thus concluded his first battle on Earth. Yet something gnawed at him, the spoils left by the gate's master. Among them was one troubling relic, and Lion chose to shatter the cursed stone. A decision made to prevent disaster, whose significance would unfold later. In the 4 days since his return, much had transpired. First came disputes over taxes, matters foreign to a king, leading to frequent misunderstandings. His stubbornness only worsened the ordeal. Meanwhile, converts were being gathered to prepare for the rise of a new god upon Earth. Another pressing concern was securing a proper residence for Lion. He demanded chambers with a grand bed, servants, and fine art for his constant delight. Truly, Lion was an extraordinary man. Perhaps all kings had once been so. In the end, Harry became his personal attendant, resolving these issues. She now catered to his every whim. His new quarters were situated beside the Hunters Association. All expenses were quietly covered by the association, who intended to use the king for their own aims. Thus, Lion's relocation was kept secret. But a mysterious figure awaited him and Harry at the threshold. It was the director of a massive trading empire, Dujon. This encounter was clearly not accidental. You may recall the blessed field where miraculous rice grew, able even to cure illness. The merchant's delight in meeting Lion was almost shamelessly obvious. But Lion had no intention of clasping hands with a profiteer. His disdain actually spared Harry from further entanglement. Of course, Lion knew perfectly well what this man desired: profit, and all because of the divine rice of Honam Valley. News of it had already gone viral across social platforms. The merchant fumed at Lion's arrogance. He thought returnees from other worlds lorded themselves above all, scorning others. So he plotted to humble the king with a taste of modern culture. Meanwhile, Lion had already set himself 3 goals. First, to spread faith anew. For though Earth housed many gods, true holy might was absent. Humanity needed belief and the mercy of divinity. His second aim was to raise new knights of the Grail. This world had no warriors of holy power. As Grail's guardian, Lion stood as demigod, his knights as living saints beneath him. Third, he vowed to purge evil from Earth. Only by fulfilling this could he claim success. Soon came a formal meeting with the Dujon director. This time, the man brought a lavish gift, certain it would dazzle even a barbarian. Lion accepted it with courtesy, and had Harry open the box. Inside lay a high-tier weapon forged by the Dujon Guild. Yet Lion dismissed it at once as unworthy. No weapon could be true without divine consecration, he explained. Thus, the merchant lost all credibility before him. Still, Lion consented to test the blade. Harry, entranced by the guild's craft, even wagered it might match the king's arms. But the moment she swung, the blade shattered like brittle glass. The famed weapon left not a scratch on Lion's steel. So was revealed the paltry worth of human arms. Lion almost pitied them and resolved on a course of action. He ordered the merchant to state his true business without delay, for the king had little patience for riddles. The answer was plain. The company sought a patent for the holy rice. Lion instantly grasped the insult, and his wrath blazed. To him it was sacrilege. To barter divine grain for profit was a direct affront to the goddess. He declared the merchant had condemned himself with such words. The harvest was a sacred gift meant to be sown by the faithful. No coin could ever buy it. Tribute belonged only to the goddess through gratitude and belief. And so negotiations collapsed. Another matter now awaited Lion's attention. He instructed Harry to make arrangements. She, thinking he sought a test of strength, was overjoyed, but she misunderstood his intent. Lion simply wanted to find capable warriors and planned to test them. Thus, the king arrived at the Hunters' Association. The hall was crowded with hopefuls. All yearned to prove themselves and climb in rank. The higher the rank, the greater the fortune. Among them stood a plain man named Tesso. He had lingered at rank D for a decade. Despite diligence and perseverance, progress eluded him, yet he refused to surrender. His talk with an elder was suddenly interrupted by something unusual. Lion had captured the attention of all. He bore the unmistakable aura of royalty. Their eyes met, his and one warrior's. Would destiny be shaped in that instant? But that is a tale for later. For now, Lion set out on a field trial. He intended merely to observe, baffling the association staff. Ordinarily, cleared gates were promptly shut, but some were preserved for training or profit, such as the Soul Station portal. And fate placed Tesso there for his test. Imagine his shock at finding Lion present. Anxiety gripped him. Would this trial go well? Alongside him were two other novices. Their inexperience made him uneasy about the coming fight. Also present was an older man of limited skill. And lastly, Lion, who declared he would not be fighting. Typical behavior for a king. The mission: slay 50 kobolds. Though stronger beasts might appear, an association officer would oversee them, intervening only in dire need. That safeguard was their only comfort. Still, Tesso fretted over the outcome. As leader, he suggested ambushing kobolds in the forest. His plan focused on striking those within a cave. Experience lent him confidence in his tactics. But confidence is fragile. They soon confronted the kobolds. These creatures were hardy and vicious. The group fought with coordination, archers raining arrows. They dispatched the beasts swiftly, breathing easier. Tesso commended their teamwork. Yet doubt lingered. Why had the strange foreigner abstained from combat? The overseer reassured him. Even inaction would be assessed. The party, slightly relieved, pressed onward. Everything is proceeding as planned, they thought. They ringed the cave with fire. Their tactic was to flush monsters into panic, making them easy prey. But Lion intervened. He disliked the method, seeking further explanation. Tesso, who had used it thrice before, defended the strategy with confidence. No one cared to heed Lion's grumbling about shallow tactics. The flames roared as the team readied their assault. They struck in unison. Arrows cut through kobolds like rain. Tesso swelled with pride at the success of his plan. But then a chilling roar split the air. The dungeon's boss had arrived. Could they possibly withstand such a foe? Two youths reacted at once, charging the Knoll captain. Even the rookie showed flashes of promise. But Tesso alone could not withstand a C-rank beast. The situation teetered on disaster. The boss's strikes were crushing for a novice. Tesso hurled himself into its path, shield raised. The force nearly shattered his defense, but he endured, waiting to counter. He doubted he could withstand another. At that instant, Lion stepped forward. Intrigued by Tesso, he urged the man to try once more. But the youth was speechless as Lion halted the monster's strike with 2 fingers. The king commanded him, "Lift the shield and face the beast." If he could endure once, he could do so again. Yet Tesso cried out in despair at the peril. Lion bristled at the rejection of his guidance. Still, Tesso clung to survival by any means. Then the gnoll turned its fury on Lion. With a mere glance, the king measured his foe, but the battle was Tesso's to claim. Meanwhile, Lion instructed him how to brace the shield, when to strike. He sought to unlock the young man's hidden potential. Tesso knew he lacked innate talent, yet belief could raise him higher than any gift. And so he braced himself and endured the blow. He succeeded, but in premature triumph he lowered his guard. The gnoll captain felled him with one strike. Afterward, Lion sought an audience with the Hunters Association's leader. Disguised as an ordinary worker, the man had witnessed the trial. He was impressed. Lion had swatted the dungeon boss aside like a toy. So he tasked him with a mission unsolved for a year: cleanse a dungeon of its master. The target was the Stone of Wisdom, guarded by a tank destroyer monstrosity. The KP Guild was dispatched to support. Ignore their names. Watch the events unfold. This gate led into a futuristic world. Thus, the guild had to strategize against cybernetic horrors. Not an easy feat given AI and advanced weaponry. They fortified a towering structure as their base, yet not a single enemy could be spotted. The silence of the city bred unease. Their captain rallied their spirits, for reconnaissance was crucial against the unknown destroyer. They prepared for high-stakes scouting, but before the speech ended, the captain was sliced in two. Panic surged. The foe was a sniper. The destroyer's firepower was beyond measure. Retreat became their only option. One hunter checked the escape route. As she ran, an ominous tingle brushed her neck. A second later, her head hit the ground. A lethal web blanketed the city. The soldiers hacked at the steel strands in terror. But it was staggering, all this woven by one enemy. The tank destroyer pressed the attack. Its power and intellect dwarfed human limits. This machine was no mere foe. Its name was Yapi, built to guard this city under any condition. But it was only one of many failed attempts to purge this gate. Another raid was soon arranged. This time, Korea's strongest guilds and the Wizard's Tower joined in. Alongside them stood Harry and Lion. She was deeply anxious, fearing for her king's safety. Yet it was also his chance to earn glory. Lion agreed. If the king abstained, the threat was trivial. He then drifted into deeper thought. He asked Harry, "What is the king's true role?" She answered, "To govern. But anyone can rule." She realized Lion acted only when no one else could. Thus, his title symbolized the last line of hope. If he entered battle, it meant the crisis was dire, and it could even bring shame upon knights unfit to act. He knew these were not his knights. Still, this army had its share of strong fighters, but they had never tasted true war. They launched their attack, banking on patterns they had uncovered. But would they adapt when the battle shifted? For this foe, the Spinner, was born for combat. It still obeyed its final command, to guard the city. It cut down every threat in its path. The Golden Lion Guild captain struck first. His blows pierced the machine's armor. The others pinned it with fire. Magic tipped the scales further. Though battered, Yapi recalculated with cold precision, locking onto its primary target. But then it fled, firing wildly even in retreat. Shots rained as it withdrew. The warriors sheltered under a dome of magic. But they couldn't linger there for long. As the shield dissipated, they scattered. Yet doom still closed in. Steel webs ensnared the streets. The army seemed doomed. The Spinner prepared a lethal discharge. But suddenly a horse thundered forth, Lion astride its back. He offered the monster an honorable duel. Yapi engaged its combat systems, targeting the king. Yet Lion charged without fear, sovereign calm in every stride. "The king does not fall to cowardly fire," his voice boomed. Two titanic forces collided in a clash for the ages. But something unexpected happened. Yapi's AI, able to process infinite scenarios, froze, for what unfolded defied all logic. Before battle, it had calculated Lion's threat level at 0, meaning he posed no danger. Reality shattered that judgment. Lion invoked a sacred law of divine protection, a vow that ensured he would pierce through once. Yapi's bullets fell harmlessly. The machine staggered, critical damage mounting. It recalibrated. Lion was now its highest threat, choosing retreat to recover. Lion frowned but conceded. Machines, too, needed repair. Memories stirred within Yapi of a woman's voice pleading for protection. That memory fueled its resolve. Restored, the spinner returned to the field. It wandered to a cemetery it once cherished. There, it vowed to protect even the dead. Then it returned to its lair, where Lion awaited. He had tracked it, seeking words with the machine. This was to be the clash of human honor against cold logic. Lion embodied chivalry itself, disdaining cowardly strikes, seeking only fair duels. So he let Yapi fully prepare its arms. True, not all fought honorably, but one must never forsake knighthood. That very spirit made Lion invincible. The machine opened fire without pause. Yet Lion would not yield. He slipped past every barrage, unshaken. Yapi soon grasped the terror of his strength. And so their conflict became a pursuit. Lion thundered on horseback after his prey, but logic could not decipher him. Their deadly chase continued, gunfire and hooves echoing through the ruins. But battles do not last forever. At last, Lion's strike landed true. The spinner suffered mortal damage, systems failing. Even then, it clung to its purpose, and self-destructed. Its story was tragic, from awakening in a cargo bay. Its sole purpose to defend allies and city. It had done so, repelling invaders and earning glory. Once it was hailed a hero. To despairing citizens, it became hope itself. The Knight of Steel, their shining emblem. So its days passed. Alongside other machines, it protected the city until there was nothing left to save. That same woman's final plea echoed, "Protect the city." It was the spinner's last order, to keep intruders away from that sacred relic. Years passed until Lion felled him. Within its hidden base, the king stood unharmed. He soon discerned what Yapi had been guarding, the Pearl of Wisdom, an artifact that should never exist. Lion honored the machine's loyalty with profound respect. He marveled at how long it had fought alone. For to him, Yapi was no mere weapon, but a true knight of loyalty. And so he shattered the pearl to fulfill its mission. He consecrated the loyal knight, granting him peace eternal. The hunter's chief raged at this, deeming it reckless. But he did not know the pearl was a demonic snare. It first granted wishes, then devoured souls, leaving husks behind. A cruel trick, like training livestock before slaughter. Thus, such abominations must be destroyed without delay. Returning to Yapi's remains, Lion honored him as a brother in arms. He blessed the machine's shell, praying it rest at last. Then a brilliance filled the chamber, and Lion thought he saw the spinner stir. A small automaton crawled forth from the wreckage. Lion, awed, began the ritual. He believed the goddess would raise Yapi as her holy knight. Once more, divine radiance engulfed the room as Ariana descended. All felt the overwhelming majesty of her presence. The king welcomed her and presented the noble knight spinner. She was startled, for he had not fulfilled her quest. But Lion vouched for him, declaring him a great knight who could walk in light. Ariana perceived his honor and wisdom, yet noted his heart remained young. At last she asked him to aid her first knight in purging evil. And thus Sir Spinner was born, a new knight of the Grail. Meanwhile, across the sea in America, the magic tower stirred. The chief wizard groveled before the pearl. Their schemes had been thwarted by a returnee named Lion. At the mention of his name, the pearl quaked in fear. The wizard hastily switched on the news at her demand. Perlina froze in horror. How had this man reappeared? She shrieked that she would never act again, and then fell silent forever. But Spinner's initiation was not without cost. Lion writhed in agony, blood spilling from his lips under unbearable weight. The goddess Ariana reached out to him in thought. She knew ordaining a Grail Knight on faithless earth demanded unimaginable sacrifice. She cherished Lion's unwavering devotion and urged him to rest, trusting the gods to finally bear their share. She called upon her divine kin, reminding them of their obligation to their champion. On the day Lion turned 121, only he remained as knight in his ravaged world. All the gods had taken refuge within him, hiding in shame. For 180 years they watched as Lion battled evil alone, the weight of the world crushing him, leaving the gods indebted beyond measure. Ariana declared her night exhausted, demanding the gods at last end their silence. The god of iron urged them to follow the example of the goddess of life, who had already taken her first steps upon earth. The gods resolved to pour their might into this world, dazzling mortals with real miracles and divinity. Even through that strange invention called the Internet, the newly anointed Knight of the Holy Grail was to aid in this divine mission. The association's leader was suddenly shown a bizarre YouTube clip, a video of prayers to goddess Demira posted on the channel of the Lion Guild. The association's veterans were stunned, unable to fathom why a survivor would dabble in social media. They suspected Hari had orchestrated it, though doubts lingered. No one among the hunters knew who truly stood behind it all. Meanwhile, the guild's own tech expert had taken charge of the computers. Harry fretted, wondering if Sir Yacht Spinner had finished with her laptop. The knight muttered about successful viral marketing and some mysterious disruption in the network. Naive Hari thought Yappy was simply gaming, marveling at his surprising tech savvy. The head of the Hunters Association stormed to the Lion Guild, hidden deep in the Naju Plains. His demand was immediate: take down the video at once. Yet before that he was deeply shaken. Who dared reveal such a thing? Discovering the culprit was none other than Yacht Spinner left him dumbfounded. That a war machine could be capable of such antics seemed absurd. But let's return to the heart of the matter. The tale, steeped in wonders, seemed too impossible to believe. Yet once the world heard of those sacred crops, throngs would come. Not only honest farmers, but profiteers too. Lion, however, showed no concern. He calmly reminded Kim that one cannot pilfer what the goddess had bestowed. Kim was impressed by such unshakable conviction, and the truth of those words would be tested sooner than expected. That same night, mercenaries descended upon the fields. They braced for heavy guards, yet found the land eerily unprotected. Their orders were simple: seize the seeds and torch the fields in a blazing inferno. They had already been paid in advance, so they wasted no time. Men spread out across the farmland, each taking a sector. But soon, unease settled over them. Scarecrows dotted the fields everywhere. The longer they stared, the more it seemed those figures were staring back. An oppressive tension thickened the air. The captain scoffed, barking that it was nonsense. Their priority was to burn the fields. Gasoline was poured, but when two men were sent toward the warehouse, they vanished without a sound. And suddenly the scarecrows seemed far too close. One appeared directly beside a soldier. The man broke, shrieking in terror. These scarecrows moved. Real monsters revealed themselves. The captain bolted, abandoning his men. But his path led straight to the grain warehouse, their very objective. He ignored the monsters, assuming they were distracted by the squad. He ordered the rice to be loaded into the truck. But with his first step, a thunderous blast erupted. The warehouse was encircled by hidden mines. The mercenaries reeled in shock. Who had set such traps? From the shadows, Yacht Spinner emerged. He announced coldly that the intruders would be eradicated. By dawn, the mercenaries lay bound in chains. They were displayed beneath a plaque inscribed with 5 laws of life and prosperity, and a 6th, above all: destroy any who dare covet the harvest. With the capture of criminals infamous nationwide, something remarkable occurred. The value of blessed rice soared to unprecedented heights. As Lion expanded his influence, he appeared more often at public gatherings. It seemed the age had come for him to rise as an internet phenomenon. The king was content, for these were the gods themselves adapting swiftly to the modern era. Then came an event that startled everyone. The Hunters Association summoned all low-ranked fighters for assembly. Their astonishment was complete when Lion himself stepped forth. Without delay, he proclaimed a call to arms. The Pantheon was recruiting soldiers. Those who proved their mettle in training would become his knights. But first awaited a trial of steel. The task was plain: clear the yellow gate at Samshin Station. The hunters understood instantly. Portals were ranked by color. black gates were reserved for the strongest S-rank hunters alive, red for S-rank elites and top A-rank fighters, orange for B-rank under master's command, and below them, yellow, green, and blue in descending peril. The Soul Station gate, where Lion had once observed, was a mere blue, but yellow meant certain death for most C-rankers, let alone D-rankers. He allowed any unwilling to withdraw without shame. Surprisingly, few departed. Lion then questioned them about their resolve. Among them, Tesso caught his eye. The youth trembled, aware this was a guild of true legends. But he seized the chance, convinced they would not be abandoned. Lion was satisfied. He saw fire and grit within them. He declared that a soldier's nobility lay in obedience, to follow orders in faith of their knight's honor and might. Thus began their trial. The hunters donned heavy armor. Lion, in contrast, strolled as if on a casual walk, yet his skin itself was tougher than steel. Tesso prayed no disasters would strike. Within the portal, the trial took a strange turn. They had to choose a tribe to lead to victory in war. Supporting monsters was the bizarre condition, but thoughts were cut short when orcs charged upon them. The beasts encircled the party, demanding answers. Harry's eyes darted to the king, gauging his reaction. She chose to follow the test's rules, speaking first. The orcs listened and invited them deeper. They were brought before the chieftain of the Battle-Axe tribe. He proclaimed war to be sacred and death in battle a blessing. Lion's fury erupted at such words. At once his wrath blazed against these creatures' twisted honor. The chieftain, enraged by the insult, lunged, but his assault was brushed aside effortlessly. Lion thundered that such monsters could never bear the title of warrior. To him, this was justice incarnate. He had already slain more than 8 million orcs in his life. His hatred for them seeped into his very allies. His aura of Lionheart strengthened comrades, bolstering their resolve. He commanded shields raised. The enemy pressed back until the moment came for the strike. His rage was so fierce it nearly consumed him. He summoned his warhorse to personally trample the last remnants. When it was over, satisfaction showed on his face, but Harry whispered uneasily, "Why such slaughter?" She wondered aloud if perhaps somewhere lived an orc who did no harm. But Lion's creed was unyielding. The only good orc is a dead one. The orc's story was tragic nonetheless. After portals tore open, many fled here, refugees from dying worlds. Humans welcomed them, believing coexistence possible. But in time, the orcs turned once more to bloodshed. They became humanity's unending scourge. Sir Yappy, too, was assigned a mission: eradicate the orc clan. With the king and Hari, he traveled to a remote settlement. Yacht Spinner had prepared an artifact there, a container of radioactive waste meant to taint the river. The plan was simple: wait until battle-worn orcs came to draw water. It was the sole lifeline of the village. By nightfall, sickness racked them. Bodies ached, stomachs churned, and not even the shaman could name the curse. At that moment, Lion's forces struck. The weakened tribe was annihilated. The raid ended with a hidden mission cleared. The king rejoiced, another evil erased. But joy came too soon. The shaman, miraculously alive, rose before them. His wail rang out. Gokrok would never forgive such treachery. Lion tried to halt the ritual, but it was too late. The skies blackened like a storm. Something immense was about to descend. Indeed, a new message came. Gokrok, god of the orcs, would appear, and he must be slain. The god's gaze locked on the king. He spat that this alien freak must be erased. Yet his first strike failed to land true. Gokrok bellowed. Someone powerful shielded this outsider. What deity stood with Lion? The king trembled with rage. The mere sight of such arrogance repulsed him. He swung once, severing the god's arm. Gokrok howled in agony. Only a holy blade could inflict such pain. He knew instantly who stood before him. Not just a warrior, but the butcher of orcs and the bane of demons. A legend that haunted even hellish worlds. Gokrok dared not linger. He fled. And thus ended the savage clash. Lion's men gathered trophies when a new command arrived. The god of iron spoke through Yappy. The severed hand must be preserved. It could amplify the team's magic. By absorbing its essence, Goddess Ariana's bond with Lion would deepen, and it would pave the way for the Grail's restoration. The king was astonished. Only 4 such relics existed: Spear, Mace, Grail, and Lionheart. Now lay a chance to restore the Grail's might. To Lion it was a true blessing. Suddenly, Spinner accused a knight. The king demanded the truth. Yapi exposed the man as a thief of spoils. Harry was tasked to search him. The suspicion proved true. The orc chieftain's heart was hidden on him. No one knew why he had done it. In Korea, such theft was a crime. Lion wasted no words. He struck and severed the man's hand. For in his army, the laws of Lionheart ruled. And in those laws, thieves lost their hands. Yes, it seemed brutal to Earth's people, but the lesson was priceless. Then Tesso stepped forward. He begged the king to let them reattach the hand. Otherwise, the punishment's purpose was void. But Tesso explained they had lived under different rules, ignorant of these new laws. And all they asked was a single chance. The king respected his words. He told the thief to thank those who spoke for him, and in deference to this world, Lion restored the hand. But mercy was limited. The man was expelled. Only those who embraced the Lionheart path could remain. Once bound, none would leave his side again. That evening, the hunters gathered at the Pantheon Guild. The Knights of the Grail confirmed the test was passed, but Lion identified a grave flaw: weak physical conditioning. From then on, training would follow the Lionheart Army's code. Sir Gratz, slayer of giants, spoke bluntly. A man grows strong only by being struck. The recruits were unsettled, but Lion pressed on. He declared only through pain and recovery could true soldiers be forged. So they began by striking each other. The warriors struggled to see the sense in it. They cried that their bodies would collapse. Lion quickly grasped their fear. They hadn't realized they carried a treasure: the Grail's protection. They watched in awe as wounds closed. The king explained, "Near the Grail, flesh always heals." His command was harsh: fight non-stop for 5 hours, and if any remained at the end, he would crush them himself. The second Grail Knight, Spinner, was to oversee. The regimen was merciless: ceaseless drills, meager rations, scant sleep. But it forged strength. Tesso had begun his own grueling practice. Everything about knighthood felt strange, and he never expected the king himself to instruct him. Lion observed keenly, noting each flaw. He emphasized one simple lesson: the shield must cover the brother's right shoulder. Even blind, it could not be lowered, else a gap in formation became a breach. The king used the classic hammer and anvil tactic, but Tesso doubted its use against unpredictable monsters. Lion explained that true mastery required vast hunting lore and improvisation. That skill was gained only in service to the goddess, battling monsters. So soldiers were taught the greatest virtue: absolute honesty. The more they mastered it, the greater their chance of survival. But Tesso yearned for more. He longed to be a knight, yet feared it was beyond him. The truth was simple: a knight is one who bears the hard path for a noble cause, one who shields the innocent, does good, and swears service to the goddess. To take that sacred oath was to become a knight. If Tesso had courage and resolve, he would earn Lion's respect. The boy vowed to achieve knighthood. Meanwhile, in America's Magic Tower, a dark event unfolded. An entity of the lair returned. She was determined. She would not share a world with the holy madman. But this time she had a plan to kill him, and she was certain it would succeed. At last, the Pantheon's training concluded with a great ceremony. The warriors were set to strike the yellow portal. Strangely, Hari and Yapi were excluded, while Kim came as observer to judge the recruits. Lion wasted no words. The time had come to prove themselves. No more drills. They marched into battle. Here they would learn the meaning of serving under King Lionheart. Into the gate stepped 49 D-rankers, one observer, and the king himself. But Spinner immediately sensed something amiss. 52 figures had entered. Someone did not belong. He rushed forward. Harry tried to follow, but too late. The portal quaked and changed. It turned crimson. A red gate now. "Do you recall?" Harry was aghast. The trial had shifted. Inside, the truth was clear. It was a demon gate. Lionheart's command was swift. Attack. The observer was stunned. These recruits did not flinch. The battle was savage. Kim realized even B-rank hunters would falter here. Yet these novices stood their ground, fighting like veterans. And this after only 4 weeks' training. The king pressed them onward, rallying with sharp orders. Then emerged the demon troll. Unstoppable, unbreakable. His strike rivaled an A-rank blow. But Tesso stepped forward, enduring it. Spinner hurled himself into the fray. The king was stunned. His knight should not even be here. But questions could wait. Together they slew the monster, scattering the demons in fear. The Knights of Sparrow wept in gratitude. And Earth's warriors received their charge, defend the kingdom from the Demon King's invasion. But then it was noticed, the portal was gone. Yappy reported someone else was within. Tesso suggested they'd been drawn into a higher-tier gate, which meant only one thing. They were trapped until it was purged. Lion felt it. This was no accident. Would he have the strength to face the Demon Lord himself? The kingdom of Sparrow, with 1,000 years of peace, was nearly erased in a breath. Demon hordes razed its cities to ash. Only the royal citadel endured. The survivors waged a desperate stand on hope's final thread. This was the backdrop of the new gate. But unlike others, this one bore a timer. Even with tasks complete, even one surviving monster would seal it shut. Lion found it troubling. There must be a hidden condition. Kim asked what he intended. Lionheart did not hesitate. He would slay the Demon King. That night he called the Pantheon. Goddess Ariana rejoiced to hear her first knight's voice. He and the gods had already sensed that alien force. A power beyond comprehension. One fit for a devil or a king among demons. Ariana assured him, if it were truly a demon king, the aura would be stronger still. The Pantheon added, Goddess Dust wished to enter this realm, having sensed great significance. To awaken her would require Lion's aid. The next day he entered Sparrow's castle. The ancient palace stood proud, its butler serving queens for centuries. The current sovereign, Beatrice, awaited the visitors. Lion strode in solemnly. First, a duke welcomed the delegation, then gave a speech. In Sparrow's name, he would reward the foreign heroes. But something felt off to Lion. He demanded to address the queen herself, but every attempt was blocked. His patience frayed. At last he thundered his name, King Lionheart, and declared his crown. Then he seized the duke by the collar. He would delay no longer. His hand rose to snap the man's neck. Guards rushed to restrain him, but the king's gaze pierced all falsehood. He ordered the wretch to reveal its true form. The impostor never dreamed it could be unmasked. It was a demon. In an instant, several more shed their disguises. Panic erupted, yet Lion stood firm. His voice rang out, sharper than steel. He forbade fear. They were few, and united could be slain. And so it proved. Castle knights and other worldly guests charged as one. When silence fell, the lesser demons were corpses. Lion pressed onward, intent on reaching the queen. But the captain of the guard barred his path. Lion halted, not from fear, but respect. He knew the man's loyalty, yet this was no time for protocol. By right, he could act in crisis. Then the queen fainted, unable to rule. Meanwhile, the citadel itself teemed with demons, hatred seeping from its walls. The guard captain asked plainly, what did this foreign king seek? Lionheart was blunt, absolute command of the army, for only he could restore order. Thus dawned a new era for Sparrow. He revealed the grim truth. Demons had long worn human masks, but despair was needless, for he had a way to expose them through the holy fire. Flames harmless to mortals, but to demons unbearable, ripping away their guises. Lion wasted no time. When a werewolf appeared, he struck. From afar, a magician of America's tower observed in failure. Their schemes lay in ruins. Many demons were slain, others captured alive. Spinner oversaw the interrogations. Demons, underestimating him, made mistakes. Then came the bucket of holy water. From then on, questioning went smoothly. Spinner did not relent until answers were his. Thanks to this, Lion learned Sparrow's dire state. He praised his allies' work, and curiously asked what became of spies who leaked secrets. The robot replied he eliminated them with a sonic signal. Lion approved. Justice had its own music. But suddenly, fury consumed him. His chest tightened, breath ragged. The thought of demons breathing his air was intolerable. Rage drove him to the brink. Spinner urged swift eradication of the source. Lion nodded in grim accord. As a demigod, fatigue was foreign to him, a living weapon. Thus began the night of purging. The American wizard entered a place steeped in dread, a den of demons. His orb warned him not to meet their eyes. Mortals were too weak to withstand their corruption. One monster barred the path, demanding he halt. How dared he trespass into a palace of luxury and torment? The orb whispered. This was the demon of discord, Androgynous. The fiend recognized the familiar essence sealed within the sphere. Indeed, an old goblin lingered there. He made Androgynous an offer, but the demon sneered, reminding him who ruled here. He scoffed that no one could match him since the fall of the archdemons. But the orb's inhabitant silenced him. 180 years ago, not only rulers but the Lord of Pleasure himself was annihilated, and the being within had witnessed that carnage. Back then, 5 mighty demons united to seize the world, but their end was ruin. 3 overlords and 10 million fiends perished. The orb's prisoner was one of the rare survivors. At these words, a pact was sealed between the 2 demonic powers. The Dark One's odds of victory rose to 70%. Now the wizard sought a corpse collector. Fortune seemed with them. One appeared. But disaster struck. The orb ordered them to hide. King Lionheart himself stood before them. He sensed the warped energy in the air, though nothing showed. The wizard and orb, cloaked in invisibility, froze breathless. Lion knew a presence lurked. But Spinner arrived, reporting enemy nearby. The king nodded, setting off with his knight. Terror, unlike any before, seized the wizard and his ally. Later, Lion finally lay down to rest. But thoughts of demons of lust and discord gnawed at him. Something was amiss. Why were such fiends clustered in this gate? What lay beneath it all? Then suddenly the queen materialized behind him. She addressed him. Whether knight or king, it was to Lionheart she spoke. Her beauty struck him. It seemed the source of all this strife. Perfection too flawless not to invite ruin. If she was to blame, then even mortals would see she stood upon the edge of an abyss. She introduced herself, asking him to lower his guard. She had come to thank the savior of her kingdom, but Lion noted it was hardly the right moment for such a visit. Hand on her chest, she confessed in anguish. She was under watch by her general and knights, as though imprisoned. Lion was surprised. The general seemed incapable of treachery. Yet Beatrice, pressed for time, made her plea. Lion listened, withholding judgment. She begged him to slay the general and his knights, and in return she would give him everything. She drew near, whispering for him to search the castle's dungeons. There, she said, lay the general's secret. Then the moment ended. Knights burst through the door. Only King Lionheart remained. He admitted to seeing the queen. But the general showed no surprise. Though times were dire, leaving a queen alone was unthinkable. Ricardo claimed demons never struck by night, but Lion knew better. Such fiends knew no time. The general should have known this too. Instead, Ricardo cut the talk short. Before leaving, Lion revealed the queen's claim, that she was held hostage. The general silenced him harshly, saying such things must not be spoken to outsiders, and slammed the door. Lion sensed grave secrets lay beyond. To uncover them, he would need to probe the dungeon. So he sent Spinner to investigate. The next day, demons launched a full assault on the castle. But before they reached the walls, a spear of light skewered them. The holy weapon struck without mercy, while Lion consigned their souls to the Grail. He forced them to listen, teaching the worth of life through death. Meanwhile, Ricardo and his men descended into the cellar. They checked the ancient seal. Only a sliver of time remained before the Old Testament's century closed. When Ricardo pulled the cover, Yapi saw the truth. Above, the king triumphed. Countless demons were slain or subdued. Yet oddly, the people's response was muted. Even this victory barely stirred their hearts. In wars unending, even triumph tastes hollow. Only a handful drew strength from it. Such is war's bitter truth. But what disturbed Lion most was the absence of high demons. It meant the true operation had succeeded. Now he turned to the dungeon. As expected, he was denied entry. He did not argue. He blasted the way open. Stunned knights followed him into the strange depths. Lion recognized it instantly, the place the queen had spoken of. He rushed in without pause. What he saw froze them all. The queen lay like a sleeping beauty on silken sheets. The knights, bewitched, praised her beauty, stepping closer. Lion stopped them, feeling the taint. Yet his aura, bane of dark magic, failed against it. So he resorted to harsher means, subduing his enchanted allies. One wounded himself, breaking the spell. The Grail then cleansed Tesso's mind as well. The general was aghast. He never thought anyone could resist. But Lion knew. The castle guard were not charmed. But Ricardo's excuse that they had grown used to it was nonsense. Her allure was no human charm. It was sorcery, a curse of nature. Lion had faced such power before, the mistress of pleasure. Yet something gnawed at him. Though steeped in evil, Beatrice lacked the stench of true darkness. So he invoked the goddess of dreams and death. The maiden answered his call at once. Goddess Dust greeted him warmly. She sensed the corruption of lust demons behind the spells. The ritual of temptation repeated endlessly, binding all in dream loops. But even the longest dream must end. She commanded the truth to be unveiled. The world around them collapsed into shadow. Death Knights emerged. Lion knew they lacked the strength to craft such illusions. It could only mean the queen was the source. If Beatrice awoke, the nightmare would end. But he was denied. Ricardo lunged at him. Lion was dismayed. Had the man abandoned his honor? Perhaps Ricardo had long forsaken it. Their clash was fierce, a spectacle of power. Lion felt his might. It was formidable, perhaps greater than before his death. Yet honor, once bartered for lust and pride, cannot protect truth. A blast thundered. Lion held his blade to Ricardo's face, ordering him to awaken. He knew the man's torment. Perhaps they had remained loyal even in death. But then why had the queen begged their execution? Was she herself the evil? Lion demanded the truth, and Ricardo confessed a shocking tale. Long ago, the queen bargained with the devil. Sparrow was then on the brink of ruin. She had no choice but to accept. But it was a trap with no escape. Her mind eroded piece by piece. Ricardo watched helpless as decay consumed the realm. The thing inside her never ceased seducing him, until one night succumbed, seeking to defile her. Then Ricardo made his terrible choice, to preserve honor, to shield his queen. The castle's knights took their own lives, that they might serve even after death. Thus they sealed their lady below, protecting her and the world alike. 80 years she languished, unknowing of time. Only now did her plea make sense. Then Goddess Dust spoke, her tone dire. She sensed catastrophe. Lion realized it. The demons were marching, not scouts, but a full army. The danger was grave. All warriors with Lionheart readied for the coming storm. They faced an overwhelming horde, far larger than anything they had ever encountered before. Yet the aspiring knights of the Holy Grail had no intention of retreating. Their entire lives had built toward this moment. At the same time, the archdemon barked commands to his legion. His minions assaulted the castle endlessly, like starving beasts on the hunt. The monsters unleashed upon humanity were not only powerful, but engineered purely for war. With each passing moment, their ranks multiplied. Despair loomed heavy in the air, as if hope itself had been smothered. But the silence before catastrophe often masks the coming storm. It was only a pause, a fragile stillness before Lion's hidden might would awaken. Even his loyal steed, Stallion, strained beneath the crushing weight of the aura. What the defenders lacked was a decisive force, a surge strong enough to flip the battle's course. Lion himself questioned whether his body could endure unleashing his ultimate technique. Still, this wasn't a matter of strength, but of responsibility. He was bound to push beyond every limit, whatever the cost. In that dire instant, long-awaited allies appeared, the fallen knights. They had endured endless wars, crushing losses, and the despair of near defeat. Yet given even the faintest chance to alter destiny, they chose to rise once more. With a simple nod, Lion accepted their stand. Words were unnecessary. That gesture alone was enough. They recognized in him their beacon of hope. Though their world lay ruined and poisoned by evil, Lion's heart remained a sanctuary for the divine. Within him burned a light untouched by death, darkness, or time. At that moment, even hunters and the Queen's sworn knights halted, entranced. They watched as Lion surged forward into endless night, racing toward the glimmering stars. In his wake, hope itself ignited. Lionheart had revealed his true self. He stood as the first knight chosen by Phthos, god of war and flame. His very presence was more than symbolism. It was a declaration of defiance. He vowed to transform the earth into a blazing arena where all evil would be consumed. Summoning a celestial chariot of fire, Lion smashed through the demon ranks, leaving chaos and burning fields behind. Stallion, his faithful warhorse, was finally granted rest. Now the moment had come for the other knights to rally. If they followed his charge, victory would no longer be myth, but reality. Even as despair threatened to swallow them, Lion pressed on without hesitation. Alone, he advanced at the very front, pitted against the endless tide. The demons held their ground, unwilling to yield an inch. The archdemon shrieked with fury, driven half mad. How could a mere mortal breach the endless ocean of his forces? The feat defied reason itself. Arcane cannons rained down fire, streaking across the sky like falling stars. Lion only tightened his grip on his blade. He had always despised long-distance attacks, dismissing them as cowardly tricks. Now, as explosions split the air, a feral madness gleamed in his eyes. This was no longer a battle. It had become a hunt. And then Androgynous appeared before him, demon of temptation and excess. Yet something was strange. The creature failed to even register how the mortal had vanished from his sight. For Lion had already descended from above, striking from the skies where death falls unseen. He demanded only one thing from his knights: endure for 60 seconds. Just a single minute would be enough. The archdemon began to sense that the tide had turned. Warriors who had been ordinary men yesterday now radiated unnatural strength. Realization struck him. This was Lion, the one who had slain Dothradon, that infamous fiend. Names were irrelevant. The truth lay elsewhere. Lion possessed the power to end demon tales for good, and he intended to bring Androgen's saga to its final page. The demon roared threats of annihilation, swearing to reduce all worlds to ashes. But everyone knew his shrieks were hollow. True might is not loud. It is the quiet steel of resolve. Lion kept his silence, embodying the stillness before the detonation that reshapes battles. His strikes wasted no effort. Every blow landed merciless and precise. And so, beneath a sky of fire and blood, Androgynous fell, the archdemon of debauchery destroyed. Since Sparrow's founding, peace and prosperity had flourished across the realm. The Queen believed such harmony would endure without end. In truth, everyone thought the same, until the demons set foot upon their soil. The wise sovereign, gifted in magic, instantly grasped what must be done. She conjured a vast protective barrier to shield the kingdom. Yet even her spell could not withstand what followed. The demon's foul essence seeped through towns and villages like venom. Hope evaporated in moments, for these abominations refused to die. It became undeniable. The realm's destruction drew near. Then, unexpectedly, one demon approached Queen Beatrice. His bargain was simple: endure a century of devastation, and the invasion would cease. She never even asked why such a promise should be trusted. Without hesitation, she accepted. It was a cunning snare, but it offered a way to protect those she loved. Thus began the fall of Sparrow's proud kingdom. Once noble and radiant, it sank into decadence, temptation, and moral decay. The wisest advisors, the bravest knights, even the queen herself, gradually all became captives of the demons. They were bound not merely by curses, but by twisted desires. The archdemon left behind ruins, tainted relics, cursed weapons, and a crown steeped in darkness. That was when the goddess of dust intervened. What drew her attention was the crown, the emblem worn by every high demon of temptation. Within it lay a mystical key capable of weaving illusions. She resolved to claim this artifact for herself. Lion, meanwhile, felt at peace. The gods had sanctioned his deeds. The war god, Thetos, even appeared in person to offer thanks. With two deities before him, Lion dared to voice a plea. He wished for the souls of the fallen knights to finally find rest in heaven. Both Thetos and Pylos faltered. The tangled darkness of those souls gave them pause. Then Beatrice stepped forward. She implored the foreign gods to forgive the knights. Her words carried pure conviction. The goddess of death and dreams relented. She vowed to cleanse the souls and grant them another chance. But her aid came with a condition. Beatrice must become her priestess and help Lion spread a new faith. Only then could Sparrow hope for rebirth beneath divine protection, and the knight's spirits would be restored. Beatrice accepted without the slightest doubt. Soon after, Lion returned to his surviving companions. 6 warriors had perished in the brutal clash. Their loss weighed heavily, and Lion prepared to honor them in prayer. He turned to the god of war and flame. He begged that the souls of the valiant fallen be welcomed, that they might share in an eternal feast among the immortals. The gates of paradise opened in answer. Lion, wounded but unbroken, prepared to descend once more. When the gate cleared, Lion and his band emerged. The Hunters Association leader swiftly registered Beatrice as a survivor and offered condolences to the families of the dead. Lion resolved to personally visit the bereaved households. He also intended to release footage of the mission, both to reveal the truth and to recruit new hunters. He knew well that evil would eventually return to their world. When it did, strong and disciplined warriors would be needed. Yet what unsettled him most was the demon's peculiar behavior. This time, Lion chose not to wait. He sought answers himself. That decision brought him once again to paradise. There, God's messenger was received with great honor. Under divine protection, all proceeded smoothly. Saint Anne herself welcomed Lion. At her side stood the late king of Lap, Jonhard. For the first time in 180 years, new souls had entered paradise, and they were now under care. The former king instantly sensed that his descendants' visit bore purpose. But before he revealed anything, Lion turned first to the gods for counsel. He was directed into the sacred forest. Mounting a majestic steed, he rode deep into Paradise's heart. Lion knew that one day Stallion would join him here. Yet before that, he needed to find an heir. The forest sages welcomed the god's messenger warmly. After all, even the deities themselves were indebted to him. Lion immediately requested to see the sage closest to him. Thus, he came face to face with Gunler. What Lion sought was a sapling from an ancient tree. His world, Kemlea, would soon be targeted by darkness. He had confirmed this during his last mission. The fiends already knew the king had returned to Earth and had begun to stir. Gunler understood. The omen mirrored Sparrow's fate. Evil was gnawing at creation again. As the sole mortal able to carry something back from paradise, Lion was entrusted with the sacred sprout. Gunler, old friend and comrade, rejoiced at their reunion. He urged Lion not to rush his final passage to paradise. With that, Lion's business was concluded. Before he departed, old allies came bearing gifts. The king presented him with reins capable of taming even legendary beasts. Sir Grados bestowed a fabled training manual, and from the great feast came a consecrated cross. This amulet would guard Lion until the holy sword was reborn. Thus he returned to his guild, revered even in heaven. His allies awaited him back on Earth. Lion next visited the queen. He began by apologizing for dragging her into such hardship. Yet to her, after ruin and torment, even this new life felt like a blessing. For a time, Beatrice still had to balance conflicting energies within her. But that was not today's concern. They had gathered to honor the fallen knights. Lion wondered if she had managed to adapt to this unfamiliar world. She assured him adaptation wasn't essential. What mattered was to keep one's dignity and rule by one's own principles, for every sovereign must remain true, no matter the realm. Even beyond life, one should bring meaning through righteous deeds. This was precisely King Lionheart's creed. Beatrice understood. Such conviction was why he had endured centuries of war against demons. He then invited her to join his mission. She accepted with joy. For long she had craved the power to avenge her kingdom's ruin. During a night's walk, the two rulers encountered Hari. Lion asked the girl to serve as Beatrice's aide for a time. The queen instantly sensed the girl's potent aura, and Lion urged her to draw her blade and reveal her talent. For Hari, it was an immense honor. She unleashed her fiery strength. Of course, Lion's sharp critiques followed, yet within them were invaluable lessons. Beatrice added her own counsel: channel flame mana directly into the sword. That would intensify the strike and make the fire harder to extinguish. Beatrice herself wielded staggering magical might. Hari realized how much more she had yet to master. After all, heavy responsibilities in the Pantheon Guild rested on her shoulders. Thankfully, she had Spinner to assist. He handled all the administrative burdens. Hari even asked him to purchase attire fit for a servant. She didn't know he relied on online data streams riddled with ads, and thus he ended up selecting the trendiest style of clothing. But enough of that. New adventures awaited our hero. Not long ago, he had visited the Hunter Academy. At first, cadets bristled at his blunt arrogance. Lion spoke harshly, without courtesy. Yet everything changed the moment they witnessed his inner power. His confidence, battle scars, and indomitable aura humbled even the proudest recruits. Several soon sought entry into the Pantheon Guild, craving true strength under his command. Young hunters believed training with Lion would shape them into real warriors. But even more flocked there for another reason: Hari. To their surprise, many were her admirers. She was not just a fighter, but a benefactor of orphanages, beloved for her kindness. Children saw her as a heroine embarking on some grand quest. The truth, however, was far less romantic. Poor Hari was merely trying on the servant garb Spinner had ordered. The robot failed to grasp her embarrassment, for by all sales metrics, it was a top-rated set. Flushed and mortified in the revealing outfit, she was suddenly interrupted by visitors at the guild. Sir Spinner rushed to greet them, while Hari, frantic, tried to flee their stares. When Lion caught sight of her attire, his fury nearly boiled over. Never before had an idol's meeting with fans occurred in such a ridiculous and awkward manner. Meanwhile, far away on a Korean isle, the Red Gate yawned open. The Golden Lion Guild marched in to clear it, the same guild encountered earlier. Many familiar hunters stood among them, yet this time they faced no ordinary trial. Before entering, they were already quarreling over how to split the spoils. With 3 S-class and 1 A+ among their number, they were convinced no foe could delay them for long. But the instant they crossed the threshold, the hunters' grins vanished. Waiting before them stood Jobrick himself, a legendary knight of House Lionheart. The portal's purpose was unmistakable: to overcome the might of Jobrick. The hunters were stunned by the formidable foe who had materialized. Jobrick's bearing radiated power and menace, his demeanor utterly solemn. He demanded to know why strangers had harmed the soldiers of his realm, warning that their fate depended on the answer. The Golden Lion Guild's leader attempted to negotiate peace, but Jobrick would not be swayed. To him, any hand raised against his nation's army deserved death. His judgment was absolute. All 6 would pay with their lives. At that same time, Hunting Academy students gathered at the Pantheon Guild. Lion was preparing to address them. Among the aspiring knights stood Hari, who, though mainly his aide, was required to remain at his side today. Lion had no intention of accepting everyone, only the worthy would be chosen as pupils. Families would see it as the highest honor, for before them stood not just a warrior, but a living legend. Yet first came the trial, to measure what these youths were truly capable of. Lion commanded them to take up arms and hold their ground until the last one fell. Their challenge was to strike him even once. And make no mistake, this test was no ordinary spar. It resembled a final boss battle. The Holy Grail's blessing shielded them from death, but even so, Hari collapsed in exhaustion. Lion fought as though he foresaw every move. His defenses were flawless, his counterattacks executed with deadly precision. He explained that soldiers were simple to train, but knights required a different path. His first company must reach the standard of royal knights, while the rest should climb at least one tier higher. The recruits glanced at one another, startled. They had never heard of such a rank system. Lion chose that moment to reveal how the Lionheart Kingdom classified its knights. The lowest rank consisted of initiates who had yet to swear the oath. From them, the worthy advanced to royal knights. Above stood knight commanders, leaders of troops and orchestrators of grand strategies. Beyond them were the Knights of Light entrusted with divine missions. Once given such a quest, they abandoned all else until its fulfillment. At the pinnacle stood the Guardians of the Holy Grail. This title was reserved only for Grail Knights who had defeated King Lionheart himself in fair combat. Lion admitted that in his current condition he was but a Grail Knight at best. Even so, his strength exceeded imagination for most onlookers. The cadets could not begin to fathom the true extent of such power. Lion hinted that comprehending it would be nearly impossible. Meanwhile, the hunters who had faced Yobrick awoke in a place entirely foreign. They had been rescued by the shaman Hilda of the local tribe. She expressed heartfelt gratitude, for the outsiders had defended her people from the kingdom's ruthless army. One huntress, however, had no memory of the ordeal. They were fortunate to have escaped. Their foes had been heavily armored infantry, difficult to outrun. But Yobrick, relentless and monstrous, had pursued them almost to the very end. Salvation came only when the Woodson tribe intervened. Even so, Hilda could not fully heal one of the hunter girls. The curse Yobrick inflicted in combat stifled her recovery. The saintly power resisted mending. Magical seals soon appeared upon the hunters' bodies, marks placed by the tribe with restorative abilities. Afterward, the Woodson elders convened a council. For years, their people had suffered under the kingdom's army, branded as heretics. Villages were plundered, innocents were tortured and flayed. Though they fought back, the nightmare could not be halted. In desperation, they prayed to the divine, and strangers arrived in answer. Yet even with new allies, Jobrick's might loomed too great. His armor could withstand a bull's charge, and even after incineration he regenerated. While he lived, every other knight was bolstered by divine blessings. To counter him, artifacts capable of piercing such defenses were required. Hilda revealed that one of her tribe's seals held such a property. The hunters were stunned, at last a real chance to bring the monster down. They pledged to defend the tribe. In return, the Woodson people promised their aid to the foreigners from Earth. At this time, Lion led his students to a horse farm. They had already passed their initial training. Now came the crucial task of finding their lifelong partner. For a knight, a steed was not a mere animal, but a companion of destiny. Mutual understanding between the two was essential. The young trainees scattered eagerly, searching for their future mounts. Even Queen Beatrice graced the farm with her presence. Both she and Hari quickly selected worthy steeds. Yet the peaceful scene shattered with grim news. Lion was urgently summoned by the Hunters Association's leader. A dungeon breach was imminent. Though the king was not bound to intervene in every gate, this one was different. Its master had declared allegiance to the goddess of life and fertility, no ordinary dungeon. When Lion's squad arrived, unease settled heavily upon them. Inside, a dead hush and unnatural emptiness prevailed. The dungeon's master bore a name Lion knew well, Geobrick. As soon as he surveyed the battlefield, realization struck. This knight seemed to have pursued the eradication of an entire race, wiping out all who had lived there. The squad traced the signs, trying to piece together what had happened. But Beatrice noticed Lion pressing ahead with alarming haste. His eyes burned with severity, his stride resolute. He admitted his miscalculation. This territory was a snare for the unready, for here dwelled the Knight of the Holy Grail. Sir Geobrick had once been Demira's chosen champion, 3 generations before Lion. Over 8 centuries past, he had crushed barbarian swarms and was fated, legend said, to ascend to heaven. Yet something had gone terribly wrong, for Geobrick never reached paradise. Even Beatrice was shaken, unable to believe such a fate possible. Lion offered 3 theories. Perhaps Geobrick had miraculously survived, or his soul lingered trapped between worlds, or worst of all, he had deserted his divine path. If that was true, their battle would transcend mortal soil and touch the roots of truth itself. Thus, an assault on him was unavoidable. Lion gave firm orders. No matter what unfolded, they must stay by his side and not rely solely on instinct. Only a few steps remained before the truth revealed itself. Suddenly, Hari cried out. A village was under siege. Lion roared too, his voice filled with rage. The carnage reminded him of battles with orcs, the same fury, the same helplessness before cruelty. He spat curses at his vile foes. Hari believed he had come to rescue innocents, but her heart trembled at the thought he might have attacked the tribe himself. She struggled to accept the scene before her eyes. Could her king truly have lost his mind? Everything in her screamed that slaughtering common folk was wrong. They were supposed to shield the weak, not harm them. She nearly rushed to stop him, but Beatrice quietly urged patience. Lion never acted rashly. She assured Hari that Lion could always be trusted. He never made foolish choices. In truth, the squad had not attacked, despite the horrors unfolding before them. It wasn't because they lacked justice or compassion. Rather, this realm was unlike any other. Behind these gates, reality itself was twisted. Monsters, echoes of tragedies, shadows of the past. The enemies here were not living beings, but fragments of memory, and so striking them down carried no sin. When the chaos ended, the knights gathered around Lion. They hailed him as guardian of the Holy Grail, a rare honor. Their commander introduced himself as Benedict. The name stirred recognition, yet Lion could not place the young man. If Benedict truly belonged to the Grail Order, he should have reached heaven long ago. Either his training was unfinished, or he had perished in battle. None of their faces seemed familiar. Lion introduced himself, declaring that the goddess Ariana had blessed him with the lion's heart. The knights understood. Though that title once belonged to another, they accepted his claim. Then Lion spoke plainly. He needed to know why they were here. Most of all, he had to learn whether Geobrick had sent them. Their answer would decide everything, for Lion had to face the Grail Knight himself without delay. The truth had to be uncovered. Meanwhile, the hunters allied with the tribe readied for battle. They knew this gate was perilous, a step away from black rank. Still, with 4 S-class warriors, they believed themselves equal to the task, especially armed with the tribe's magic seals, which gave them hope of victory. But Geobrick only pitied their arrogance. Instead of fleeing when given mercy, the mercenaries had returned. This time, Demara's faithful knight would not allow them to escape. To him, justice demanded that foreigners who crossed the line must face divine judgment. And so he invoked a devastating spell, the wrath of heaven. The hero's situation grew dire. Geobrick's decree was final. All must bow before the true gods. Then a miracle shook the battlefield. The earth trembled, collapsing all around. Holy retribution rained from the sky, shattering the ground beneath their feet. The hunters stood stunned, never having witnessed such overwhelming force. In a blink, 3,000 tribal warriors were wiped from existence. It seemed inconceivable that this night could ever be defeated. Geobrick prayed for the goddess to protect the sanctity of their land, to offer heretics one last chance at redemption, or erase them utterly. A savage battle ignited. Geobrick could scarcely believe mere mercenaries wielded such power. But the truth lay in the seals. Perhaps they acted without honor, yet by chance aligned with divine will. For decades, Grail Knights had sharpened their blades, ready to hunt unceasingly when called. The hunters quickly realized they stood no chance. Their only option was to flee, praying another guild might intervene. But their plans were interrupted by the arrival of Hilda, the tribe's shaman. She feared the hunters would abandon her people to die. Though they had no intent to reveal their plans, her words shifted the moment. Hilda cried out in despair. They had failed yet again to close the cursed gate. Her hatred for humankind boiled over. She snapped, vowing to take the shortest path this time, whether they liked it or not. To her, it was humanity's fault her tribe lacked the strength to endure. She began summoning a terrible magic, the blessing of the beast god. If true, that power would soon surge beyond control. She ordered her thralls to strike down Yobrick, but the knight only shook his head, disappointed. The mercenaries were even more foolish than he had believed. They had willingly allowed the barbarians to brand them with seals. The situation was collapsing rapidly. Jobrick resolved to return the survivors to their world, even at the cost of his own life. Sacrifice would be necessary. Then a cry split the air, a shout of glory to the kingdom of Lionheart. And in that instant, Lion himself appeared before the Grail Knight. With calm, unshaken resolve, he declared his name as King Lionheart. Beatrice showed no surprise. She had expected such a move from him. Without hesitation, Lion and his squad charged forward. Hari, however, was shaken. Learning of skins being torn from bodies and children burning in flames horrified her. But the truth was grim. Skins were removed to carve out seals, binding vows to the beast god. Abusing such power caused the seals to consume the bearer's soul. Hari recalled similar horrors from devilish legends. Lion remarked that people clung too much to slogans about rights. What good were they without order? The world demanded not pity but uncompromising justice. On the field, he sensed flaws within Yobrick's divine law, but the enemies had to be dealt with first. He invoked the great law of God. Light blazed around them, radiant as the sun. Instantly, the knights were healed and the bewitched regained clarity. Jobrick froze, bewildered. Faith returned to his eyes. Before him shone the very truth he had forgotten. Then, without warning, the goddess Demira herself appeared. The immortal patroness urged her knight to stand with Lion. Doubt fled from Jobrick's heart. From that moment, he swore allegiance to his true king. Lion, too, was overjoyed, honored to gain Jobrick as an ally. Yet the tribe gathered en masse, merging into a monstrous abomination. Its sole aim was to crush King Lionheart. At that moment, Beatrice appeared beside him. Her Majesty came to carve a path for Lion. Only together could they vanquish the heretics. The shaman attempted to flee, as any thief would. Rage twisted her face. Lionheart had ruined her designs. But before she could escape, Beatrice seized her. The queen drew forth a monostone she had recently obtained during portal hunts. Behind those gates, suspicious quantities of ore had accumulated. These stones were meant for capturing monsters. And Beatrice continued speaking. She explained the gate, like herself, was trapped in a temporal loop. Though the being before her was not a demon, the essence of its actions mirrored one, which meant the conversation was bound to be intriguing. To loosen the shaman's tongue, she used charms of seduction. But the gods were enraged. Their priestess had betrayed them. In moments, they would manifest within the portal itself. Before that divine breach, warriors took a moment's rest after the ferocious battle. Then came grim tidings. Jobrick and the other knights could never leave these gates. To seal them, the knight of this realm must be defeated. Jobrick laughed bitterly. No one had managed to slay him in centuries. Suddenly the heavens cracked red, voices dripping with hatred roaring for King Lionheart's death. The cries demanded nothing less than King Lionheart's destruction. The descent of the gods had begun, unstoppable now. The bound shaman whispered that the gate's end had arrived. Then Jobrick spoke words none expected. Even I was taken aback. The sole way to seal the gate was for it to fall, meaning Jobrick himself must die, and the portal's existence would vanish with him. No one chose to flee. They braced for the final confrontation. Each was ready to sacrifice life for the future. Lion felt shame. He knew his loyalty could not equal Jobrick's. Before his sacrifice, the knight made one last request. He presented the king with a warhammer, a fragment of his strength. He asked Lion to guard it until a truly worthy bearer arose. Lion vowed to honor Jobrick's glorious sacrifice. The knight then gave his final command. Hearing those words cut deeply. The Lionheart Knights willingly marched to their deaths. They would perish for justice itself, backed by the gods. Lion ordered the others to head toward the portal. He stayed behind, together with Hari, in the parallel world. His majesty awaited the moment to fall. Yet suddenly sickness overcame him. Meanwhile, Yobrick ascended to the heavens. His fury was beyond description, for Grail Knights had always served the sacred law, and vows sworn in battle must be fulfilled. Thus, this day would forever be remembered. Our hero then devoted all his spare time to training. Odd as it seemed, Lion was exhausted, not from combat or grueling trials. He had never felt such weariness, not even in war against demons. The truth was that he now had something precious he feared losing. Once again, he dreaded a future of fighting alone. Hari burst unexpectedly into the training chamber. It was late, and both were startled by the encounter. She remarked that everyone had been training non-stop. Lion approved of their diligence and decided to show her something. He instructed her to raise her sword and try to block his strike. To be honest, it was nearly impossible. Yet the outcome would be interesting to witness. He carefully explained what Hari should do in such a moment. Following his guidance, she managed to withstand his immense force for an instant. But still, she paid the price for her errors. After sharing tales of knights and their heroic deeds, he told her to rest. Hari noticed at once the sadness shadowing the king's eyes. She immediately confided this to Spinner. Together, they realized the real cause, crushing stress, and the best cure was light-hearted amusement. Hari, unlike Yopa, already had some ideas brewing. The robot readily agreed her plan was splendid. Meanwhile, Lion sought counsel from the gods. Ariana and the others observed that after 2 centuries of ceaseless battles, he deserved rest. Ariana even suggested he share a bed with a woman. She deemed the queen a fitting match, though she did not dismiss Hari either. The goddess insisted the knight must restore his royal line soon. Lion was about to protest when Hari suddenly rushed into the hall. She claimed to have prepared something special for him. He instantly remembered her last surprise, but she quickly explained this one was different. Soon they stood before a portal. Captain Kim reported that even the association had supported the endeavor. Hari believed with all her heart that the king would enjoy the gift. She described the gates. They weren't ordinary. Inside dwelled countless beasts and monsters. Each slain creature awarded points based on its kind. Lion realized it was a hunting ground. Hari had arranged an entire portal for his recreation. The king hadn't hunted in ages and doubted he would enjoy it. Yet once inside, he was swept up in the thrill. For the first time in years, he took up bow and arrows, collecting trophies from fallen beasts. Though he disliked ranged weapons, he wielded them as though gods guided his hands. Hunting was an aristocratic pastime, and every knight was expected to master it. Lion was famed as the greatest champion, but only the second-best hunter in history. First place belonged to a maiden blessed by the goddess of the moon and hunt. Her arrows streaked like meteors. With full strength, she could pierce mountains. Amid the hunt, Lion discovered a cursed totem. Such relics were exceedingly rare. Hari was to sell it and deliver the proceeds to the hunt's organizers. But more importantly, she rejoiced to see the king finally at ease. Then came troubling news, the disappearance of Geobrick's hammer. In truth, it still stood in the guild courtyard, immovable. Naturally, Lion lifted it with ease, but the weapon immediately revealed its will. When he touched it, something inside resonated. He realized Geobrick was transferring his strength. It was time to find a new bearer for this mighty relic. An order went out to notify the Hunters Association. Whoever could lift the hammer would inherit it. But first, experts had to assess it. When the specialist arrived, he was left speechless. Before him lay an artifact of epic rank. Hunters classified weapons by tiers to battle monsters. Legendary had long been the highest, items wrought by superhuman effort. But in recent years, a new tier had emerged, epic. Among them was the blade of Mount Siobhan's master, said to shatter even heaven's demons. The 12 rings of Hera, whose sorcery could spark worldwide catastrophe. The Ice Queen's heart, sustaining life across frozen lands, and the wandering demon sword, lost since the Black Portal disaster in London. Such weapons could alter wars even in hopeless moments, and now Geobrick's hammer joined their ranks. News spread like wildfire through Korea, and throngs of challengers flocked to the guild. The ancient weapon displayed occasional defiance. It refused those deemed inadequate with swift judgment. Lord Yacht's strategy proved equally compelling. He instituted a payment system for those wishing to visit the artifact and attempt its lifting. Additionally, he gathered donations from the Pantheon organization, essentially operating in endless circles like a restless creature in a cage. This commercial strategy actually intensified public fascination with the sacred site. The concept that Geobrick's weapon generated revenue only heightened Spiner's enthusiasm further. The Pantheon organization had recently transformed into a genuine pilgrimage destination. Warriors arrived to test themselves against the weapon. Seekers came merely to observe and receive healing. Every individual desired to witness the sacred artifact personally. Yacht's Spiner, capitalizing on this focus, sought to maximize financial gain from the circumstances. All efforts served the organization's requirements and reputation enhancement. These resources were designated for organizational infrastructure development. Using cutting-edge technology, Lord Yacht constructed a sophisticated smithy, though equipment remained insufficient. Consequently, Yopa desperately searched for additional revenue streams. Tonight he would resume his criminal activities once more. The financial markets had recently collapsed. A mysterious entity, resembling a specter, had purchased all lucrative securities. This individual was generating enormous profits through market manipulation while avoiding consequences. Naturally, the masked figure was Lord Yacht himself. He showed particular concern for worldwide nutritional challenges. Vast territories suffered contamination from polluted water sources. Western nations and Asian countries initially managed these effects successfully. However, Eastern European territories faced desperate circumstances, particularly following dungeon eruptions. Yoppa subsequently acquired the contaminated regions at minimal cost. His initial venture was a grain storage facility in the People's Republic of Hyrule. The soil was purified through spreading devotion to Demeru, the life goddess. While the crops couldn't match Korean plains harvests, they proved satisfactory. The products met daily nutritional needs adequately. Most importantly, the region showed signs of recovery. Yacht recognized that Pantheon had effectively dominated the agricultural market. The danger was clear. These new territories might face invasion. Nevertheless, Yopa assumed no rational ruler would initiate conflict over such unstable land. Incidentally, an intriguing detail. Lord Yacht consistently begins his statements with Kirok. I recommend remembering this fact. The conflict eventually erupted, forcing Yacht to meet Hari directly. He explained the investment portfolio that ensured steady organizational budget growth. The investment division would now manage Hari's personal finances as well. She needed only to create an exchange account. Her financial circumstances were genuinely desperate, making investment appear reasonable. Yacht skillfully exploited her vulnerability, arguing that young individuals in capitalist societies who cannot manage money essentially abandon their futures. These words proved effective. Hari accepted. She achieved silver status, guaranteeing 200% returns. Recruiting 5 additional clients would grant gold status with 300% profits. The young woman was too inexperienced to recognize this classic pyramid scheme. Unfortunately, nobody questioned her sincere motives. Lord Spinner's pyramid expanded rapidly. Everything collapsed instantly when district court officials visited the Pantheon organization. They formally declared asset seizure proceedings. This announcement shocked Lion. He demanded immediate explanation. Initially, the organization had defaulted on loan payments. Furthermore, numerous Pantheon workers faced debt because they entrusted savings to Yacht Spinner. His investment program failed catastrophically, creating only devastation and massive losses. Staff members appeared paralyzed. Fear spread like contagion. Lion firmly suppressed the panic. He believed that with Lord Spinner's intelligence, even this catastrophe could be resolved. The automaton pledged to repair everything by dawn. His lordship solemnly vowed every victim would recover their funds. Lord Spinner then initiated a new covert mission. The operation was titled Foundation Restoration. In the adjacent republic near Hyrule, peculiar events began occurring. Long-settled orcs noticed something extraordinary. A meteor was allegedly approaching their territory rapidly. Actually, it was a powerful orbital weapon belonging to America. Someone had compromised this weapon's control systems. Naturally, Yacht's involvement was unmistakable here. The target was the People's Republic of G, where the orcs resided. A fabricated video circulated online rapidly, the American president supposedly declaring war on G. Everything appeared convincing despite being completely false. The orcs quickly understood they had one option remaining: gather their wealth and escape. They failed to accomplish even this. They faced attack. The automaton, emotionless and frigid, spoke only these words: "Return my investment." Spinner Yacht immediately engaged Total Annihilation Protocol. The orcs suffered greatly, but persevered and fought desperately. The Sacred Chalice warrior deployed his complete arsenal, eliminating opponents systematically. One objective remained. The orc leader possessed a weapon forged from exceptional metal, so powerful that dragons couldn't survive its impact. Notably, Yacht's combat suit was constructed from identical material. The opposing forces were nearly equivalent. Spinner realized this confrontation couldn't be decided definitively. The strategy crumbled before their observation. Time was critically insufficient. He adapted. He covered the battlefield with web patterns, gathered essential intelligence, then applied fundamental tactical principles. Everything resolved immediately. The remaining orcs simply detonated instantly. Following these enigmatic incidents, the peculiar conflict suddenly ceased. This was broadcast on evening news that Hari and Lord Yoppa viewed together. The young woman enthusiastically announced that Pantheon organization profits had increased by 200%. Her innocent thoughts remained focused on mundane concerns. Lion was contemplating entirely different matters at that moment. His remaining time was diminishing. Preparation of young fighters for divine presentation needed to begin immediately. He already identified several promising candidates, primarily recent academy graduates. One young woman even resembled someone from the Lionheart Kingdom. These reflections were interrupted when Lion experienced an unusual sensation. The weapon had been disturbed. What he witnessed certainly wasn't planned. Lord Jobrick's holy weapon was now held by warrior Tesso. Following this revelation, Tesso immediately joined the group personally trained by Lion. The trainees welcomed this addition. A new companion wielding the legendary weapon seemed promising. However, circumstances weren't entirely positive. Something genuinely troubling occurred. The ocean portal, known as Dragon Palace, had manifested again. They initially emerged in Tokyo Bay 25 years earlier. Previously, people assumed portals only appeared on land, so marine areas received little attention. This oversight proved expensive. The breach devastated the bay and transformed the sea into poisonous marsh. Disregarding history, the typhoon now approached Korean islands directly. The association needed to contact the Pantheon organization urgently. Before they could respond, the Phoenix organization arrived. These same warriors who had demonstrated their capabilities in Korea repeatedly. Their commander hoped the association would deploy its primary asset as well. This expectation wasn't misplaced. The consequences of the Geobrick Gateway battle remained vivid in memory. Lion himself appeared shortly. When the monarch was summoned, the situation was undoubtedly grave. The typhoon complicated gateway clearance, so Japan and America agreed to assist Korean warriors. For His Majesty, this presented the perfect opportunity to reassert his authority. The protagonist felt satisfied but immediately specified that the organization required substantial compensation. As usual, Yacht Spiner managed financial matters. Following a brief conference, Lion dictated the participant list for the pending operation. Something disturbed the aide. No female names appeared on the roster. He merely gave her a doubtful glance at her inquiry, calling it a foolish question. According to our protagonist's beliefs, women aboard vessels always bring misfortune. This represented his life philosophy. King Lion received ceremonial reception at the Republic of Korea's primary fleet. Before commencing the operational briefing, the admiral chose to meet briefly with his American allies. Their leader was the magical tower master named Shellman. Upon recognizing His Majesty among the assembly, he and his mystical orb realized they faced complete disaster. If the monarch noticed them, survival would be impossible. Shellman was protected by the archdemon's gift, a ring concealing demonic energy. Something malfunctioned. Under Lion's power pressure, the artifact began fracturing and disintegrating. After a brief introduction, the mage hastily withdrew. Meanwhile, Hari wandered through the fleet area and encountered Tesso. She was astonished that such an esteemed knight would assist the laborers. Clearly, the monarch wouldn't have assigned him such duties. Tesso, while appreciating the compliment, considered it excessive. Hari maintained she couldn't budge the weapon even slightly. The young woman playfully mimicked the monarch, imitating his proud declarations, stating that mortals shouldn't question His Majesty's decisions. She delivered inspirational and amusing phrases, unaware that the monarch himself was standing behind her. Lion was naturally displeased with this performance. He interpreted this as disrespect toward his genuine intentions. Despite everything, the miraculous occurred. Divine favor descended upon Hari. The eternal ruler of ocean and tides selected her as his priestess. Her participation in the mission was now inevitable. Something in Lion's expression was concerning. With good reason, His Majesty planned to circumvent the ancient superstition about women on ships. He intended to transform Hari into a figurehead. Only then could they finally begin their ocean voyage. The situation was actually more perilous than initially apparent. The vessels were already approaching Typhoon Nabi's center, while His Majesty calmly fished as if nothing was happening. Hari couldn't comprehend where fish could exist, adjacent to the military fleet amid stormy waters. Nevertheless, Lion managed to secure his catch. The Vice Admiral received immediate preparation orders. This was actually part of a special Ocean Lord ceremony. The protagonist summoned the divine entity to appear before those who had entered his waters. Even veteran sailors witnessed this phenomenon for the first time. The waves seemed to surround the ships in a living circle. The deity immediately acknowledged his protector and faithful guide. Lion was also pleased to see Poma, though the waters here seemed too shallow for him, and the ships lacked sails entirely. It was explained that this world hadn't yet embraced the true ocean teachings. Poma's selection wasn't random. Hari became the ideal vessel for divine power. Naturally, she couldn't match Lion, who could contain any deity, but it represented significant progress. Hari received Poma's blessing and the ability to control water and waves. Her purpose was clear: accept this gift and spread divine teachings worldwide. As long as the priestess remained on the ship's prow, no wave threatened their journey. The ceremony proceeded remarkably smoothly. Hari finally understood the immense power now in her possession. Meanwhile, American vessels also followed the Korean squadron. Nothing escaped the magical orb's attention. It immediately detected the activated ocean power. This meant one thing: time to concentrate on gateway clearance. The warriors transferred to smaller boats to reach the portal. Finally, the cleanup mission led by the Pantheon organization officially commenced. Through some miracle, Hari found herself on the island. She wasn't alone. They apparently got caught in a whirlwind while traversing the portal. Several warriors were missing. Among the absent were King Lion and Yappy. Unexpectedly, a serene voice echoed in Hari's mind. It was Poma. He remained close, assuming a small turtle form to personally guard his priestess. Furthermore, the divine being understood exactly what had occurred. Poma couldn't dispel the vortex, but wave force had carried everyone to safety. Hari felt incredibly thankful for this support, though she had no idea what to do now. The island was overrun with creatures. The young woman was about to handle the crabs with her flames, but the fire suddenly extinguished. Poma was concerned. The priestess of the ocean and waves lord shouldn't use foreign elements. In another island section, Mage Shellman also skillfully managed the creatures. Using magic, he revived one and commanded it to lead him to the obelisk. The orb reported that multiple such obelisks existed, all requiring destruction. Shellman was suddenly intercepted by other warriors. Everyone had received identical assignments: destroy the Rakshar obelisks. The Phoenix organization leader decided to proceed carefully. Previous experience suggested the real threat might not be where expected. In the past, they were supposed to destroy Geobrick, but the actual enemy proved completely different. First, they needed to discover who this Rakshar truly was. Meanwhile, Harry, alongside some warriors, repelled the creature assault. Warrior Tesso observed a disturbing fact. His Majesty's aura had no effect on the knights. Though they recently confirmed Lion's aura extended 30 kilometers, its influence had completely vanished. The surrounding islands were much smaller, so the cause must be something else. Poma also couldn't establish contact with King Lionheart. Where had Lion gone? The protagonist had actually descended to the ocean depths. Lord Yopi also ended up on the island. He was surrounded by crab hordes, and unable to contain his amazement, exclaimed his favorite phrase, Kiruk. Surprisingly, the creatures happily repeated it back to him. Even Yacht's spinner was somewhat confused by this scene. Meanwhile, the knights verified who had vanished during the whirlwind. On the island, besides the Sacred Chalice Knights, were also American warriors. Their leader was Alan, an S-rank fighter and fairly renowned figure. The man was also troubled by the Korean leader's absence. There was no time for lengthy situation discussion. A trial awaited them. The first creature wave. The warriors had to battle unknown entities. Without the monarch's enhancements, the knights struggled. Through combined efforts, the fighters managed to repel the A-rank creature attack. Meanwhile, on another island, 36 hours had passed since Spinner Yacht was rescued by creature crabs. They suspiciously complied with all his commands, enabling successful defense against the opponent wave. The automaton managed to study local characteristics. Creature wave renewal took approximately 12 hours, and the crab-like entities themselves had abnormal growth and reproduction rates. His thoughts were interrupted by one cadet's voice. It was Kim. The young man reported that no obelisk had been destroyed yet. This information was important because Lord Yacht couldn't see the system window with the assignment. Together, they began analyzing known information. Creature waves grew stronger each time and attempted to destroy the obelisks. Yacht rationally evaluated the situation, considering losses among the Kiruk, as he now called the crabs. At the current rate, they would lose in the fifth wave. For successful combat, the minimum requirement was bladed weapon presence. However, Kim made an intriguing discovery. Behind the island waterfall was a cave, and inside it was an entire underground city. It appeared that the Kiruk civilization was far more advanced than initially apparent. Meanwhile, His Majesty found himself in a difficult situation. Diving into ocean depths, he discovered traces of an ancient civilization, an entire lost world. Apparently, this territory belonged to someone special, either a being with divine powers or a high-level demon. Lion summoned this creature for dialogue, and the monster responded. It knew well who stood before it. Knight Lionheart was well known among demons. Finally, after 500 years of waiting, the demon gained opportunity to meet its old enemy. Meanwhile, Hari was engaged in important work. She not only had to deal with the creatures but also save the Lion King. To accomplish this, she needed to awaken ocean powers immediately. Palma, the ocean patron saint, provided guidance. He explained that Hari needed to follow the primary ocean and wave principles. Only this way could she strengthen her faith. Through sincere gratitude to the ocean as an infinite life source, the young woman had to strengthen her elemental connection. Simultaneously, there was danger. Hari could mistakenly confuse the believer's path with the priestess's path. Her conversation with the deity was interrupted. A Rakshara obelisk was discovered on the island. Meanwhile, on another island, the Phoenix organization was defending an obelisk. The Korean warriors were suspicious of the assignment, while the Americans insisted on destroying the obelisk because it met their quest conditions. There was no alternative. The obelisk was destroyed without much effort. Now the fighters had only two objectives remaining. Additionally, after the obelisk's destruction, a new creature wave never appeared. Taking advantage of the situation, the warriors decided to travel to another island. They were even fortunate. The waves had washed several boats ashore, so now they could divide and assist other squads. The Phoenix organization was first to reach the new island and was shocked by what they observed. The coastline was littered with weapons, as if a fierce battle had occurred here. Many wanted to leave immediately. Something was clearly wrong with this place. Escape was impossible. The Kiruk detachment, armed with the latest firearms, emerged to confront them. The battle seemed inevitable. The warriors thought they had been waiting for a long time. Suddenly, an authoritative voice rang out from the depths, ordering them to bow. Before them stood the Kiruk detachment captain, Lord Spinner. The Phoenix organization was stunned. Standing before them was not an enemy, but a sacred chalice knight along with a Pantheon cadet. Let's discuss what was happening at the portal currently. Hari was with the Magic Tower wizard while Yak's Spinner joined the Phoenix organization. Only two obelisks remained, and one of them was guarded by Harry. The young woman clearly sensed the obelisk couldn't be destroyed. She perceived the dark energy that the monument was containing. The wizard didn't care. He acted decisively and without hesitation, destroying the obelisk with one strike. A terrible feeling immediately gripped everyone. An incredibly powerful creature, the Rakshar, emerged from the ocean depths. The archdemon awakened and commanded everyone to submit. The entity imposed a chaos aura on all living things. The lands turned black. People became entangled in their own despair and were ready to embrace death. Harry understood. Everyone needed to be restored to consciousness as quickly as possible. Even they tried to kill her. The situation had become critical. Could she withstand the attack of the S-rank fighter who had assaulted her? Suddenly, his blow was intercepted by another fighter. For a moment, Harry thought someone else had remained conscious and come to her aid. She was mistaken. When she was hurled with powerful force straight into the ocean, Harry couldn't believe she would die like this. She reflected on how miserable her life was. Poor Harry could never possibly reach His Majesty's power. The young woman was never able to become a worthy knight, a deity's priestess. In her moment of despair, Poma came to her. The deity called upon her to fill her heart with faith, loyalty, and trust in the boundless waters. If she listened, she could hear the ocean's song. Poma reminded her that if Harry truly wanted to gain immortal power, she shouldn't try to grasp it in her hands. Right now, she was in infinity. Harry felt a surge of incredible power. In this endless flow, she suddenly saw the trace of His Majesty Lion. She cleared the way with the incredible power of the waves. The young woman finally found the monarch. After heroism, naturally comes a time for weakness, and His Majesty was saved by Harry. He praised the young woman for her efforts, and now he rode with her on the steed to help others. Lion knew well. The archdemon had awakened, and it was difficult for mere mortals to maintain their sanity facing such immense evil. As soon as they landed, the monarch sprang into action. The Lionheart's aura resisted the demon's power. After hearing the knight's report, Lion ordered them to retreat from the gateway. If they truly believed in the priestess's protection, they would be able to walk on water, gathering all the survivors. Meanwhile, the monarch himself, along with the priestess, would hold the defense. To buy at least a little time for everyone. On Lord Spinner's island, the creature sure went wild. The strange energy of the sacred chalice knight held it back. This gave the opportunity for the Kiruk army to strike first. The battle could not be avoided. A wave of incredible size was approaching the island. This time, disaster was avoided. Harry, using the ocean's power, stopped the wave. Meanwhile, King Lionheart has found all the warriors. Lord Spinner also realized the seriousness of the situation. Lion ordered the last obelisk to be destroyed and the gateway to be closed, because without the sacred sword it was impossible to defeat the archdemon. Until the peace tree blooms, as many people as possible need to be saved. Spinner also advised saving the island's natives. because the Kiruk people had once sealed away the demon and were definitely not just decoration for the gateway. Everyone hurried to the gateway. Meanwhile, the temporarily imprisoned demon spoke to the monarch. The creature whispered that Lionheart would always lack one final step, for there was no escaping the great demon. He arrives at the Yon family residence. He runs as fast as he can to Miss his Fanny to report that the thief has been discovered. Someone from the creatures that were still alive came to his aid. Huge island crabs attacked the Rakshara. But who is it that managed to contact the heir family is unknown. He was brought by Lena from the 5th Linkara. This powerful blow, filled with divine power, decided the fate of the battle. The lady says there is no need to find out anything more. She's going to meet Tom herself. There was no time for surprise. The monarch immediately ordered them to retreat from the gateway. The evacuation of the Kiruk people was already 80% complete. The 3 giant crab islands, which had been dormant for over 500 years, were finally able to fulfill their purpose. Suddenly, Tom finds himself lying down. Rakshara reminded everyone, if they ran away so hastily now, he would definitely kill Lionheart next time. This was the first time such an archdemon had appeared on Earth. A real bolt from the blue. The battle inside the gateway was broadcast around the world, and the entire pantheon was the center of attention. The monarch's organization saved over 10,000 of the inhabitants of Krastria, more specifically the people of Kiruk. Tom can't believe that the Mirage immediately figured out that. The guy can't believe that someone could see all. The problems began with North Korea, even though they officially renounced nuclear weapons. Last night, this state suddenly severed all communication channels with the world. Satellite surveillance of the area was suspended. The immortal wishes to give guidance to talented descendants. Since the boy has many talents, he definitely meets the criteria. Now, having made a deal with the devil, they were going to become the most powerful civilization. The initiator of all this was Shellman, a famous magician from the USA. His order was simple: summon the creature. Mirage continues. The more low-level talents, the slower the guy grows. Covered in scars and deep wounds, the archdemon announced that he must first restore his body. The guy didn't know this was possible. Unfortunately, there was more than enough food here. This time, the incarnation of the divine immortal will help the guy. She already knew that archdemons could penetrate any gateway. That meant that knights might be able to do the same. In this room, the flow of time has changed. An hour here is equal to a month in the outside world. These carefree creatures began to build their homes both on land and in the ocean. Giant crabs actively cooperated with coastal cities and even joined the Pantheon Security Service. The Kyrie confidently integrated into the modern world. The Mirage disappears with the words, "If the guy is lucky." Then, after the Monarch level, he may have a chance to become worthy of beholding the immortal in the flesh. He found a suitable opponent for Tom. The guy can fight for his own pleasure. Now she was treated not only as a knight, but also as a priestess. With this title, the young woman had to accept all the responsibilities, including carrying the word of divinity. Moreover, Hari became an aristocrat and the third person in the pantheon, after Lion and Lord Spinner. Meanwhile, a veritable storm of research was raging in Beatrice's laboratory. It turned out that demons really do use the gateways. A large city like the Demon Ocean Base wakes up with the first rooster crow. In reality, the system forced participants to rescue barbarians, trade souls, and fight against the Knights of the Sacred Chalice. Warriors bring in their nightly catch for sale. Someone, to everyone's envy, managed to single-handedly bring down a silver-mooned wolf. Yulia is sleeping and calling for her brother in her sleep. Even if the gateway task seemed suspicious, most people did it anyway, mostly for the money. Though, admittedly, the people themselves weren't very smart. The monarch felt that the conspiracy of dark forces had already reached a critical point. At the same time, he fights a fierce creature for half a year. Talent of the highest level of strength shows itself well. Now the creature is getting it in no small... The Pantheon organization launched a massive attack on portals throughout Korea. The scale of the operation was on the level of a full-fledged army. The organization divided the fighters into 20 squads and set about clearing the gateways one by one. Their speed was impressive. While other organizations typically conducted 2 raids per month, Pantheon destroyed 20 gateways in just 4 days. They have effectively monopolized all portals in Korea. All raids were successful. In total, the Pantheon organization obtained almost 4 tons of precious treasures. This becomes the final chord of a 6-month battle. The enemy is finally defeated. This time, the clearing of the portals was entrusted exclusively to elite units. Tom opens his eyes to reality and breathes a sigh of relief. Hari and Kim were to temporarily avoid any contact with the organization. It was too dangerous. Finally, they were ready for a special mission. The Queen opened the portal effortlessly. This was a beautiful job from Beatrice. Yulia shames her brother for his sudden hugs and saccharine speeches. He readily asks, "The sister is going to go to breakfast herself." Their enemies this time were orcs. The allies, you will definitely be surprised, the Knights of the Sacred Chalice. The setting is the Valley of Liam. The task is to transport the sacred relic of Lord Zira. Surprisingly, the events unfolding before his eyes corresponded to real history. This truly impressed His Majesty. Lord Zaria was a knight of the sacred chalice of dreams and death. This task turned out to be his last. He never managed to complete it. Pets also walk with their owner. He possessed incredible abilities. He could create spaces of illusions where orcs died instantly. The guys are impressed by the city fountain. They have never seen anything like it before. I was truly happy to meet the divine messenger. The brother and sister admit that they haven't relaxed as much as they did on this wonderful day in 100 years. Lion himself was an unsurpassed fighter, having become a knight at a very young age. Before him stood an old man. Zaria had reached the limit of his capabilities. Yulia returns home alone and grumbles that her carefree brother let her go alone. His Majesty asked Lord Zaria to report on the situation. He simply said that he would go buy something and would be back soon, and that Yulia should go home and rest. All forces were divided into 5 groups, each of which accompanied a relic. Lion was only interested in one thing: where exactly the detachment with the main artifact was located. It turned out that the 5th convoy had set off to the southwest. Fanny explains that she is an ordinary fighter, just very... Hari and Tesso found themselves in a completely different place. Yulia asked the mouse to hide. Tom said that no one should see the animal. The knights were confused. The task was to deliver the relic which Lord Zaria had told them about. He introduced himself as the person responsible for this mission. Additionally, Tesso was made to understand clearly. He would only receive the title of Knight of Dreams and Death in the future. For now, he was just a knight sent on a special mission. Zaria had not received any tasks from the deities for almost 50 years. Yulia suggests finding a warrior skills textbook for her namesake. Despite his strength and experience, he had no superpowers that would allow him to turn the tide of battle, unlike those who received the blessings of the deities. Here in Tom's head, he hears Violet's frightened voice, screaming that the Yon family is here, and the owner urgently needs to return. One day in a dream, an unfamiliar young woman appeared before him. It was the goddess of dreams and death. The Pantheon finally recognized Zaria's merits. His time had come. Only at the age of 100 did Zaria become a full-fledged knight of the sacred chalice. Now he fought side by side with King Lionheart himself. The orcs' power turned out to be unexpectedly powerful. There was even a stone troll in their ranks. His Majesty ordered his disciples to observe carefully. They had a goal to strive for. Lord Zaria performed wonders on the battlefield, driving his horse with incredible skill. Fanny says that it would be better to ask Yulia's brother about this. She says she's just looking for a little rat who stole something from her, although the task involved delivering a relic. This time, His Majesty decided to stay by Zaria's side, to help and be with him until the very end. Interestingly, the fighters still haven't found a single magic stone. This task was not marred by malicious intent, like the previous ones. The gateway turned out to be completely neutral. It was just impossible to change its nature. Even in such a short time, the Pantheon organization has already gained a lot of useful information. Suddenly, a spear flew at Lion. Tom thinks that he is the only one to blame. His sister shouldn't have returned alone. First, he sends Zolotzi to the pocket storage to recover and rest. The Knight of the Sacred Chalice was delighted. He would gladly dedicate the execution of this creature to his majesty. Here, a gloomy Lena appears. The kidnapped Yulia is thrown into the Yoon family's underground prison. He threatened that the orcs had an army and humans would regret invading their lands. Zaria just smiled and agreed. The orcs really managed to scrape together a bunch of soldiers. In the end, it was just plain and pathetic garbage. The creature had a very bad premonition. For good reason, Zaria called on her patroness, the goddess of dreams and death, to help her faithful knight. Lena stands above him with a needle in her hands. Together they cleanse the entire valley of filthy creatures. Tom opens his eyes in an unfamiliar place and realizes that he dreamed of his... The plan was simple. Spend the night in a cave and move on in the morning. He is desperately trying to reconstruct the chronology of events. Lord Zaria confidently blocked the passage to the cave, although it was not a chalice gift, but an ordinary magic trick. Whatever it was, a long and dangerous night awaited them. She would suggest thinking it over and planning, but Tom would rush straight into battle. Hari and Tesso couldn't resist. They were eager to find out what future and past Lord Zaria meant. It turned out that the goddess Dust had endowed the knight with a unique gift, the ability to summon a younger version of yourself from the past, the one that is still wandering in search of its path. This second version was only 85 years old, and very soon it was to receive its first task from the deities. The most interesting thing is that this copy did not take away the power of the present Zaria. It was a separate body, pulled from the past. With this thought, Tom gets up and tries to come to his senses. He asks what Lena did to him. Lord Zaria immediately ordered silence. It seems the creatures have already figured out their location. The next thing I heard was the crash of stone. The creature had broken through the ceiling and was attacking from above. Lena sees that the poison has not yet left the body, and in this state, Tom is too weak. Their opponent was a creature of evil, and his poison killed instantly. It was too late to run away. Tesso was injured, and poison began to penetrate his body. Harry understood perfectly well that this situation was critical. There was only one way to save Tesso and complete the mission: kill the creature. She went to battle. That's what a young, burning heart was like. The Yoons want to expel Lena's family from the Sea Demon base, but they had no reason to do so before. Along with fire, the blow carried the element of water. This was the technique of the sacred law, a power capable of changing the very order of the world. It was thanks to this powerful combination that Hari managed to win the brutal battle. Here's the good news. In the previous version of Ser Zaria, an antidote was discovered made from sea crystals. However, it was only enough for one person. The knight, without hesitation, insisted that the young traveler use it. When Tesso agreed, joy flashed in the old knight's eyes. This time, the entrance to the cave was camouflaged much better. The poison was relentlessly destroying Zaria. The double was getting worse and worse. There's no need to worry. Another version of him is still alive, and he will deliver the relic. Death will be easy. Finally, the knight warned, someone has been hunting the sacred relic for a long time. To deliver it to King Lionheart, they must treat him as someone who can be lost. At that very moment, the goddess of dust appeared to the knight. At this time, the real Zaria, knight of the goddess of dreams and death, finished the battle. Then he orders everyone to climb into the cauldron without question. The orcs did not even try to intervene, even in the face of such provocation. Lena explains that this is a high-level elixir made using the family's secret technology and should not be underestimated. Such commanders are chosen by the orc deities themselves for their incredible services to the people. Tom clenches his teeth and climbs into the boiling vat. It was too early to draw conclusions now. First of all, he had to talk to Zaria personally. Then His Majesty revealed the truth of the past life. The Sacred Chalice Knight was stunned. It turns out he had already been to paradise. Lena leaves and asks to let me know immediately if something happens to the guy. A flying ship appears in the sky above the air residence. The elder personally meets him in the courtyard of the residence. A majestic middle-aged man slowly descends the gangway. Zen Neo, master of spells. The elder greets Master Neo on behalf of the... These creatures lead an extremely primitive life. They eat and fight all day, and after dinner they immediately fall asleep. It was this weakness that made them defenseless at night. That's how the monarch and Zarea destroyed the entire camp without a fight, without a chance. Even after that, Zarea's thoughts did not leave her. The world they found themselves in was a portal, and with the arrival of Lion, the story of his death changed. That meant that the other one was already leaving, one who can match King Lionheart himself, the strongest knight of the Sacred Chalice. Want to know one interesting thing about the Knights of the Sacred Chalice? Their power does not come simply from the sword. It is a gift from the deities themselves. Divine beings whose power depends on the faith of mortals transferred their power to the chosen ones on earth through faith. This is how the Knights of the Sacred Chalice transformed spiritual devotion into true divine power. These fighters never tired. This became a real nightmare for the creatures. This pill helps to reach the level of a monarch. Neo looks at it with a smile. Despite all their efforts, they were unable to capture either of the two mysterious attackers. The ancestor asks if Neo is happy with the gift. The orc champion was furious over the losses. Since he accepted the gift, he wonders what the ancestor wants. Before that, another shock came. The Knights of the Sacred Chalice challenged the orcs to a duel. The champion immediately ordered the challenge to be accepted. He swore that he would drag the knight's corpse away in the morning. At this very time, Queen Beatrice and the Pantheon cadets were next to another group of Zarya. The lab technician thinks that an earthquake has started. She understood. King Lion was with his team. For now, they had nothing to worry about. Just in case Beatrice had activated tracking spells on everyone. So it was only a matter of time before all the groups met. Of course not everything went smoothly. The egg then begins to draw energy from the core of life. Tesso and Hari were accompanying another convoy. Clouds of energy rise above the residence. Beatrice couldn't track him down at all. Everything was much more interesting. Yapi was in orbit. He had already managed to expand his observation of the world inside the gateway. Also high levels of flight fire, healing talents, and medium levels of healer, Dragon Soul. All evidence suggested it might have been the Imperial Knight Lionheart. Tom inquires about feeding options, beast flesh or magical potions. Then an unthinkable event occurred. This unknown figure merely gazed upward and commanded the automaton to vanish. The man hurls a rock. The worm snatches it mid-flight. Should they succeed in repelling the orc forces at this location presently, the remaining knights protecting the artifacts would accomplish their objective with minimal danger. The trainees felt anxious. Several wished they had joined the escort formations. Yet Lion quickly comforted them. Beatrice and Spinner were present. These two would certainly not disappoint them. The man hears Lena rushing through the hallway while screaming. Zarya announced, "Every warrior stands completely prepared for combat." At this precise moment, the orc leader stepped forward from the hostile ranks. The duel's terms were straightforward. The defeated would be deemed dead. His Majesty declared briefly, "Zarya shall sever the head of this insolent beast." The knight lowered his head in acceptance and boldly stated that the orc would perish this day. However, Tom must not reveal the dragon's secret presence. A single devastating strike from the orc. Tom expresses gratitude to the laboratory aide for the potion. Lena requests Tom to dine and recuperate. She must depart. Yet their champion abruptly became paralyzed. He could not even stir. This was an ambush. Zarya, the knight serving the Lady of Death, unleashed divine strength, the realm of visions. Should his blade contact an orc, the creature would immediately succumb to death's authority. However, the strategy failed, which was unsurprising since this orc was deemed the most perilous of their entire force. A container flies toward his skull but halts in midair before impact. The champion's assault was horrific. The injury bled continuously. At this moment you may proceed and rescue Yulia. Zuria battled not merely as a knight, but as a zealot of his beliefs. Lena requests not to fret. The solution has been devised. The young couple arranged an ambush, but the adversary executes a defensive maneuver. His attacks were saturated with intense loathing for everything orc-related. Nevertheless, they remained unsuccessful. Eventually, the orc's weapon penetrated his protection. An injury has manifested on Zuria's form that even I find disturbing to observe. Let us return briefly to the events preceding the great campaign against the orcs. During that time, Lion first encountered Zuria, an ordinary knight seeking divine favor. The hero stated that the expedition's primary objective was eliminating the orc champion. He acknowledged this task might prove overly challenging for a regular knight. He locates the place where Yulia is imprisoned. The Grandmaster-level sensations appeared 10 times more intense than previously. Lion could not comprehend why this individual was so determined to fight. He feels trapped like prey in a snare. He simply desired to experience life fully, honestly, vibrantly, and authentically. During the battle, the orc proclaimed that triumph would be his, yet he failed to sense the god's spatial ability, indicating he employs some apparatus. He wordlessly implored his deity for divine favor. Tom expresses surprise that such a formidable warrior was assigned merely. Yulia observes her sibling through the bars. This time everything transformed. Zuria's sword sliced through the orc champion's body, causing his collapse. The Knight of Lady Jabella ultimately prevailed. Subsequently, another adversary entered the arena, an orc spellcaster of the gods. Declaring this their initial formal encounter, Fanny positions herself beneath the moon's glow. However, the knight sensed his time was nearly finished. Regardless, he remained resolved to escort another enemy to the afterworld. Yet his majesty commanded him to cease. Lion blessed his final passage and declared to his foes that he had granted them their sole opportunity. Now everything has concluded. His power, that of a demigod, was truly extraordinary. Nobody questioned anymore that the Lion King was humanity's greatest throughout history. He remained beside Zuria until the final moment. The monarch desired the knight to undergo the ascension ritual. Thus it transpired. Lion honored his vow. The Lady of Death arrived personally to escort her devoted warrior on his ultimate journey. Lionheart solemnly vowed that Zuria's legacy would endure eternally, and his spirit would feast at divine banquets. This was his farewell to an old companion. While people mourned their hero, the orcs prepared to assassinate King Lionheart. During this time, a newcomer joined the group escorting the genuine artifact. Sir Zuria, presumed deceased by all, was reborn as his younger self. He had reverted to age 87, the period when he wandered as a knight-errant while Lion began his Holy Grail quest. Every Pantheon warrior eagerly anticipated discovering Lion's youthful character. He was history's youngest Holy Grail knight, possessing a flawless reputation. Initially intended as a common volunteer of the royal order, his ducal lineage provided direct access to leadership. Nevertheless, Lion completely validated his honors. He independently demolished orc settlements and annihilated complete heretic formations. Even Cubsars created songs about the young wandering knight. At 27, he became the youngest Holy Grail knight. Then he truly blazed brilliantly and fearlessly. None since have matched his valor and bravery. Soraya addressed Hari, requesting she remain under his majesty's guidance and training. The girl possessed remarkable talent, and Zuria perceived divine blessing within her. His words caused Tesso to contemplate. That evening he practiced sword work until exhaustion. Zuria, observing this, immediately identified the royal sword technique. He grew curious about the youth's capabilities, initiating their duel. Zuria's strikes were ruthless. Tesso stood no chance, yet this was irrelevant. It encompassed the essentials, reflexes, fundamentals, and self-development. He genuinely attempted. Following the combat, Tesso questioned whether any distinction existed between him and Hari. The difference was enormous. Hari possessed talent unattainable through practice. Tesso understood this completely. Regardless of his efforts, he could never reach her level. Yet Zaria observed a resemblance between them. Indeed, eventually he would become a Holy Grail Knight, but presently it remained merely an aspiration. Everyone, including His Majesty and the Lady of Dreams, advised him to surrender. However, he refused to listen. Others' opinions held no significance for him, because a genuine knight never ceases. He must remain fearless, maintain faith, love, and invest wholeheartedly, particularly a Grail Knight. The following day, they finally arrived at the Empire's entrance. Tesso wished for everything to conclude. The mission had prolonged, and the border gates should have opened previously. Zero was astonished. The Empire's mages were already present. Creatures began approaching from the mountains. The sorcerers wore cunning expressions. When Zaria stepped forward, a single incantation destroyed him. The wizards genuinely welcomed guests to their territory. They smiled and wished them safe travels. The warriors immediately understood. The Empire had collaborated with orcs, seeking to capture the artifacts. Their actual purpose was exploring the power of regulations, specifically magic. Though considered sacrilege, the Empire's magicians remained completely indifferent. They aimed to demonstrate that human sorcery could exceed anything. The great lightning incantation descended from the heavens toward the Holy Grail Knights. Yet someone intercepted it. Indeed, it was Beatrice. She detected her companion's peril and immediately manifested. The battle would now take an entirely different direction. The sorcerers noticed the girl possessed magical essence while being enveloped by divine energy. Additionally, this audacious beauty emanated seductive power as if emerging from a brothel window. Beatrice naturally apologized, explaining this was her innate gift. The magicians could not believe such immense energy hid behind that doll-like face. Regardless, they launched their attack. They believed nobody could resist the Empire's might. However, Her Majesty halted their assault, though with considerable difficulty. She responded with a sequence of devastating spells. She merged magic with divine force to eliminate these possessed individuals. They were so blinded by their sorcery that they could not perceive its true strength. Then Beatrice cast the supreme magical spell. Meanwhile, Sir Zaria regained consciousness. Even younger than before, he already knew the Empire had betrayed Lionheart. Beatrice commanded immediate reinforcement summoning. Containing the magicians was merely a matter of time since they emanated disturbing alien energy. At that moment, but elsewhere, Sir Spinner crashed to Earth. His form and systems sustained severe damage, requiring immediate maintenance. Before he could assess the circumstances, an unknown knight seized him. He questioned something peculiar. Why did divine energy flow from this construct? The group protecting the authentic relic fled the gorge. They needed to escape swiftly to summon reinforcements. However, the young Pantheon cadets were deeply concerned. The Empire pursued them relentlessly, refusing to surrender. Attacks poured down mercilessly, striking the warriors with deadly precision. The Imperial soldiers possessed incredible strength, yet the Holy Grail Knights had no intention of yielding easily. Tesso faced a terrifying werewolf knight's targeting. Stella, partnering with Zaria, chose to remain behind. Her mission was artifact protection. Alongside Zaria, she charged into battle to halt one of the most dangerous opponents. Their sacrifice succeeded. The other knights escaped with the relic. An Imperial warrior erupted in fury. He screamed that they were all mere fanatics, a mindless flock lacking free will, vowing to eliminate every one of them. At this moment, Zaria was reborn once more, even younger and less experienced. Even in a youth's body, he would not retreat. Before him stood the Empire's fearsome knight, yet the boy faced death directly. He addressed Lady Death, sincerely desiring to defeat not only his enemy but himself. The goddess Dust was delighted. Her little knight had again proven his fearlessness of the impossible. She vowed to care for him, assisting him through time, space, and suffering. Zaria was not immortal, but precisely this allowed him to transcend death. This time, victory would be his. The Empire's knight could not believe that wandering warriors had nearly killed him. Had he transformed into a demon then, he would now be deceased. Without hesitation, he ordered his subordinates to pursue the bastards. The relic must be recovered at any cost, even requiring total sacrifice. Only one person survived the battlefield, Stella. She stood among ruins and flames, teeth clenched, and as soon as she proclaimed, "Glory to Lionheart," a terrible sound echoed from the sky. This was not merely a comet flying toward them. He was the Punisher, the Executioner, the Witch Hunter, and the Horseman of Destruction, a divine messenger. His name was Volcanus. He asked nothing. He explained nothing. He coldly ordered the Imperials to provide excuses before he destroyed their souls. His strikes were not merely physical. Each carried truth. He revealed that the Empire existed solely because Lionheart permitted it. With each word spoken, the force became more catastrophic. The enemy, despite being an experienced warrior, could not endure these superhuman attacks. Desperately, the Imperial Knight appealed to Kanoa, the Dark God. He prayed for strength and instantly became a demon. His worldview changed, and a voice spoke one prayer, claiming they were stronger than humanity. But Volcanus ignored him completely. He simply summoned the sacred fire. Simultaneously, intense battle raged at the Empire's outpost. Beatrice continued repelling the wizard onslaught, barely maintaining her position. Fortunately, Lion came to her assistance, arriving at the perfect moment. Before they could discuss further action, another meteorite fell from the sky. This time, Lion was pleased, for within the fiery strike was the same knight he once knew well. Volcanus destroyed all surrounding evil with God's punishment, leaving only ashes. After battle, the knight knelt before King Lionheart. Lion would have preferred conversing longer with his old friend, but time was short. They needed to hurry to the gate. Lion requested Volcanus to leave something behind, a symbol of his power. The knight granted this gift. The king promised they would certainly meet again, because Volcanus was not in paradise and therefore remained alive. Finally, all knights assembled at the portal, and they had not just gathered but successfully preserved the holy relic. Though difficult through combined efforts, the mission was accomplished. When His Majesty opened the case, he froze. It was revealed that throughout this time the lost relic had been concealed within the portal, and now, finally, it had returned to its rightful owner. Shortly after this event, a treasure evaluator arrived at the Pantheon Guild. What she witnessed astounded her. The magnitude, the artifacts, the very atmosphere of the place were completely extraordinary. Hari, as usual, appeared punctually. She rescued her colleague from Spinner, who continued collecting fees from newcomers, devising new tours. Thus, the appraiser, Madame, finally reached Lyon. The king and queen appeared as a genuine royal pair. Lion decided to show her the most precious items he had gathered. Madame was amazed. Before her were legendary items, orc champion deeds, and magical artifacts. However, the most impressive was Volcanus's ceremonial dagger. Yet the final and most significant was the artifact from the recent mission, an epic-class scabbard. Specifically, the scabbard of Richard the Lionheart himself. The protagonist immediately comprehended everything. He drew his sword, and something extraordinary began, a strange, almost mystical reunion process. The instructional words left by the first King Lionheart resonated in his mind. Race toward the stars, never halt at obstacles. Perform good deeds with courage. Even if the heavens collapse, restore justice. Love brilliantly like a star and make your destiny luminous. Lion immediately stepped onto the balcony. Before all people, he formally addressed the sky, summoning the holy relic to awaken. The magic came alive. He felt the strength of his glorious days returning. Without delay, Lion commanded Beatrice to prepare for the grand ceremony. Now that he possessed the scabbard, it was time to implement the grand plan. The Holy Grail Knights were already prepared. Lion would fulfill his duty. He would summon the star. Meanwhile, one of the Pantheon cadets had planned something perilous. To eliminate one boy, she required divine abilities. He was last observed in Vietnam, still battling the demon sword. While this story was just gaining momentum, everything proceeded normally in the Pantheon Guild itself. Training never ceased for a single day. Various battle types, strategies, and attacks were continuously practiced. As practice demonstrated, these methods truly worked. Everyone who passed through His Majesty's school departed as a genuine hero. After the king's address, the cadets went to dine. There, they immediately began discussing the initiation ceremony, which would occur very soon. This ritual was meant to establish their connection with the gods. However, choosing was not easy. After all, everyone had the right to believe in the one they felt closest to. They were surprised by how diverse these beliefs were. For example, Sir Spinner was under god Thedos's protection, yet His Majesty served two simultaneously, goddess Ariana and the war god. This caused doubts among the cadets about how to choose their own. However, the dinner commotion suddenly ceased. The loudspeaker announced that one of the young knight's parents had arrived. Kim immediately frowned and silently headed toward the main hall. He did not understand why his mother had come, but he sensed the matter was serious. He was correct. She reported that one of Korea's most powerful guilds had summoned him to serve. The offer was appealing: prestige, fame, new opportunities. However, the mother could not hide her anxiety. There was a question in her eyes. Would he truly betray his father? Would he join the pack of blasphemers who despise everything they believed in? His Majesty devoted considerable time to his cadets. Now he decided to explain one of the most difficult topics: the difference between pantheon gods and other deities. However, for the students, this question proved challenging, because comparing gods is nearly blasphemous. Beatrice voiced her own theory. The difference is that some gods are real, while others are fictional. Yet she had no proof. Others attempted to discuss miracles, about how His Majesty saw the gods with his own eyes. However, all those versions were rejected. Only Yong approached the truth. She believed that the pantheon gods were truly responding. They were practicing prayers, intervening in events, performing miracles, thereby proving their presence. Yet even she admitted that God had never answered her directly. Lion was tired of theories and firmly declared that everyone was wrong. Just as he spoke, thunder tore through the sky and rain poured from the clouds. The protagonist explained that ordinary people believe that all they must do is pray, and the gods will grant everything. However, he prayed for rain and did not request it to fall on him. The cadets were surprised to notice that Lion remained dry while the rain flooded everything around. The reason is simple. The gods protected their king. They did not let even a drop fall on his head. Therefore, according to Lion, one should not expect the gods to unconditionally fulfill every wish. Faith is a choice. It does not necessarily have to be tied to the pantheon. However, His Majesty warned simultaneously that one should beware of false prophets, those who put a price on faith. After the lecture, the cadets went to the prayer room to commune with the gods. Meanwhile, Lion was contemplating something else. He had a long journey ahead. At this moment, he only had 3 Holy Grail Knights. It was necessary to awaken at least a few more. Hari had the best chance. However, another problem was that 2 cadets had become interested in the most dangerous pantheon gods. This did not bode well. A few days later, a group of men armed with microphones and speakers broke into the pantheon. These were representatives of the Palace of Light. They launched a genuine sonic attack, shouting that the path to heaven was only possible through faith in the dragon god. Their cries were accompanied by calls for the heretics to leave their land. However, it did not last long. Sir Spinner arrived at the noise. He clearly disliked that the noise level exceeded all standards. He politely requested to stop the protest, but was ignored. Then a barrage of insults rained down on him. The men mocked him, calling him a soulless machine possessed by a demon. Here, Yoppa could no longer tolerate it. He activated his divine tactical technique. Now it was he who was driving these fanatics out of the pantheon. Sir Spinner was extremely dissatisfied with the guests' behavior. He warned them they should never return here again. However, it was too late. The Palace of Light spies had accomplished their mission. They recorded everything that happened on a hidden camera. So now the world would see a crazy robot attacking people. However, everything did not go according to plan. While they were preparing an information attack, revelations about the guild itself appeared on the front pages. However, there was not a single bad word about Pantheon. The situation changed dramatically. The video had not yet been distributed when the spies' computers went down. Someone destroyed their server. While the enemies were looking for the culprits, Pantheon had already managed to cover up the traces. Meanwhile, one of the cadets was heading home. Kim did everything as requested, but now he was full of doubts. After all, he recently met the Pantheon god himself. This meeting changed everything. As soon as Kim crossed the threshold, his mother met him. However, God spoke of only one thing. He ordered the disciple to subject her to heavenly punishment. It was a test, cruel but necessary. From that moment on, thoughts of it never left Kim, neither during dinner nor on lonely walks in the park. God had said again and again, "These heretics are wicked, lying blasphemers." It does not matter who she is to him. The guy did not understand why him. Why did the god of heaven and thunder choose him for such a mission? How can he destroy an entire cult if his own mother is there? Then His Majesty's voice sounded in his head. Lion already knew everything. After the conflict broke out in the main building, he was told everything. The king came to talk in person. He turned to God and asked directly, why was the burden of heavenly punishment placed on a young cadet? The deity insisted that the boy should teach the heretics a lesson with his own hands. However, Lion did not understand why Kim was silent, especially since the cult recently tried to disrupt the Pantheon. Sir Spinner did not hesitate. He answered immediately. After all, the Palace of Light had effectively declared war on the gods. Kim began to get nervous. He screamed for his mother, begged her not to touch him. However, Lion was not a madman who destroyed everything in a row. The king promised he would bring the guilty to justice. All you have to do is show them where their base is. The history of the Palace of Light began many years ago. Their leader, Mr. Park, was just 12 years old when he experienced a disaster that changed his life forever. In those dark times, there was no order or rules. Everyone survived as best they could. That is how he became an A-rank hunter, tempered by experience and pain. His encounter with God took place in the unstable gate several years later. Then, due to a sudden complication, Park lost his entire team. Finding himself in a death trap, he heard a voice. The one who spoke showed mercy. At that moment, the 7th S-rank fighter appeared on the Korean hunter scene. It was from that moment that Park began to preach faith in the god who had saved his life. Miracles began to occur around the Palace of Light, and these were not isolated cases. Miracles happened again and again, so even the Hunters Association was forced to acknowledge the power of this guild. Glory and faith grew. Park enjoyed the attention, considering himself a conduit between humans and the gods. He said that 2 hunters received strength from God in exchange for a sacrifice. He called on others to prove their loyalty. After all, according to him, for those who believe nothing is impossible, and suddenly he noticed 2 strangers among the crowd. He felt immediately that these were messengers of the Pantheon. Beatrice was already nervous. She knew that His Majesty could not tolerate sectarians who played on the poverty of ordinary people and shattered their faith. However, Park decided to do it his own way. He invited guests to the stage, and then Lion made a move in response. He pulled out a bag of money, threw it at the pastor's feet, and ordered, "Perform a miracle." After all, it was Park who claimed that even for a small sacrifice, God is capable of the impossible. So maybe it is not about God at all. The pastor exploded. He began shouting that respect should not be given to God, but to him, his representative, that everyone must obey him. However, Lion could not understand how a mortal pastor dared to equate himself with a bishop. Park could not stand it. He called out to the crowd, and they responded. They shouted, calling Lion a heretic, a demon, a monster. The king endured most of the insults with calm dignity. However, there were things he would never forgive. First, it was an insult to his parents. It was disrespect for the entire family. Secondly, blasphemy. Mortals are not allowed to mock the gods. Thirdly, the comparison with a demon. That was too much. The king could no longer hold back. He thundered, "They will see heavenly punishment for their audacity. The light of the divine star will purify everything." Now the earth was preparing to face destruction. Beatrice curtly ordered Yape to get ready. "Just a moment more, and everything will be revealed before our eyes." His Majesty looked up, and in one motion destroyed the ceiling of the building, above which the star was already hanging. It was Mickey's comet, a celestial ball of colossal weight, capable of crushing all life. However, the main thing was not her, but the fact that the protagonist was going to use the divine power. All this magic flew rapidly upwards, straight towards the star. It was at that moment that Puck and his god realized that things were bad. Not just bad ones, it was the real end. The comet hovered over the Palace of Light. Now all that remained was to finish the job, to deal with the main blasphemer. Lion called Kim to see everything with his own eyes. The boy immediately recognized the creature that was poisoning his father's mind. She was standing next to her mother, still the same parasite. It was with him that the god of thunder wanted to get even. He entrusted this task personally to Kim. The boy was trembling with fear for his parents. However, inside another state was already maturing. Trust. He simply had to let go of his fear and accept God's will. It was just an impulse, sincere, strong, uncontrollable. Then the power of the thunder god filled him. Kim was able to break the shackles that held his parents and freed them from the parasite's influence. For the first time in a long time, the boy's heart was filled with peace. However, Lion is not finished yet. The leader of the Palace of Light, Puck, remained ahead. Now the situation was completely under His Majesty's control. This creature is the spawn of the archdemon of greed. He promised salvation to hundreds of people, lying to them with a smile. However, the moment has come when he will have to save his own skin. After that, all the news exploded with headlines. The Palace of Light was destroyed. The sectarians managed to draw a lot of people into their game, gain influence and power. However, the meteorites' fall on the building caused a lot of problems. Without wasting time, Puck publicly announced that the Palace of Light intended to merge with the Pantheon. He launched a campaign to promote Lion as God's messenger, a perfectly staged show. His Majesty, meanwhile, was closely monitoring the situation. It was necessary to begin work immediately. The priority was to forge armor and swords from the star. However, first official consent from the authorities. So Park arranged a meeting with the Minister of Science and Technology. The goal is to confirm that the rights to the meteorite belong to the Lion King. The authorities complied. They promised to take care of all legal and tax issues. Of course, not out of kindness. There are always nuances in such matters. However, His Majesty, without hesitation, agreed to give part of the meteorite as a gift to the President himself. The deal was made. However, the minister had something else important for Lion personally. It was a video from Vietnam taken straight from the battlefield. It has the wandering demon sword on it. Its owner, John G. Ho, has just left for the Japanese archipelago. The situation was serious, and a response was needed immediately. The strongest guilds gathered together. Everything was organized by the head of the Divine Sword Guild, Old Master John Jisoo. He was going to kill J-Ho, and so he decided to warn everyone. However, the meeting took an unexpected turn when important guests arrived. His Majesty personally entered the hall. Instantly, a silent battle of glances broke out between the old king and Lion. Without hesitating for a second, the protagonist was the first to challenge and ordered the leader to vacate his place at the negotiating table. The first sword of Korea, a living legend, John Jisoo. His names, titles, and invaluable contributions to the country's development made him an untouchable elder, almost a shrine. His authority and power broke even the character of the Divine Sword Guild head. However, the Lion King did not care. Standing before him was just another young man. Fortunately, the head of the Hunters Association told Yong in time that His Majesty would hit as many as 300 this year. It is all about the power of the Holy Grail which prevented its knights from aging. Only then did the king finally smile. His time was more valuable than gold, so the surprise of everyone in the room immediately faded into the background. The president of the association began his report. 13 years ago, the Black Gate opened in London. No hunting team could overcome them. They were so heavy. The European Union remembered the disaster in Shanghai and immediately sent 24 S-rank hunters, along with almost 2,000 A and B rank warriors. The chief mage of the Time Tower led the cleanup. The battle lasted almost 2 months, but they finally succeeded. It was the first successful capture of the Black Gate in history. However, the real problem started later. Shortly after the cleanup, an epic sword appeared. Overkill. The British government won the bid for these weapons, paying a lot of money. It was used by the best sword masters of modern times. However, things went off the rails when he was handed over to James of the Gentleman's Guild. What happened next turned into a disaster. About 800,000 civilians died. James was destroyed, but his vessel, the Demon Sword, escaped. Since then, the whole world has tried to stop the next chosen ones. 4 years ago, the sword appeared in Korea. It was taken possession of by Sword Master John Jiho, the son of the head of the Divine Sword Guild, and also the father of John Soyeon, who now serves in the Pantheon. That is why the first sword's request was short and clear. Keep his grandson as far away from this matter as possible. Now it is worth paying attention to John Soyeon. She lived in Pantheon, where she trained with other cadets. However, at night, nightmares would haunt her. Again and again she would see the demon sword in her own father's hands. In those dreams he killed everyone she loved. Then, silently, he went to get her. Eventually, the girl could no longer live with it. However, these dreams were not only a burden for her. They made her believe that this time everything would be different, that now she would have a chance to change something. She had already made a deal with the god of the Pantheon himself. The protagonist, as always, sternly warned the cadets, no deals with deities. But John took a different path, and only Byzantus, one of the most daring gods, agreed to her desperate proposal. He did not trust her, and the girl understood that. However, despite his doubts, he still decided to give her power. John wanted more than anything to become a knight of the Holy Grail. However, God proved to be no less audacious than his covenants. He bluntly said that the girl was not even up to par to stand next to King Lionheart. She does not see herself replacing the Avenger of the Gods. The Santis saw neither strength nor dignity in her, but he offered his help anyway. Because he knew her thirst for revenge was stronger than fear. After she had carried out her revenge, her soul would irrevocably belong to the god of the Pantheon. While John was making dangerous deals, King Lion was busy forming the association's Special Legion. The composition was to include the 4 strongest cadets, who met all of His Majesty's expectations. Among the chosen ones was Hari, one of the most talented of all. For her efforts and strength, she received a special gift, a sword, a spear, and light armor. All of this was created by the hands of Sir Spinner himself, so that the girl could fully realize her potential. Her equipment received the blessings of the gods Thetos and Pomi. They filled the gifts with their power. A similar honor fell to Cadet Kim. The god of lightning wished that his disciple would become a just judge, capable of mercilessly punishing the enemies of King Lionheart. When the time came, His Majesty told her about the request of her grandfather, the first sword of Korea. He asked to keep his granddaughter as far away from this dangerous mission as possible. However, Lion himself saw that the girl did not just want to participate, she had to. The god Byzantium blessed her gift, imbuing it with darkness, destruction, and a thirst for retribution. Only this power could fulfill her wish. Then the Lion King himself intervened. As a mentor, he wanted to protect his students and wanted only the best for them. The goddess Ariana herself appeared before Chong. Her appearance was dazzling. A gentle, warm light illuminated the girl. Ariana said that John was a lost lamb and her light would show the way to salvation. The goddess was only fulfilling the wishes of her faithful knight Lion. However, Byzantes did not like it. The god of darkness accused the king of being too soft on people. Although Lion listened silently, both knew the reason he was the king of men. Byzantes suddenly reminded him of the daughter Lion had lost. Was this tenderness also connected to her? After that, he focused his gaze on the heir to the lion heart. God reminded him that all great kings had gained glory and darkness, not in light. However, Lion remembered it well. However, to Chong, Byzantes spoke differently. He asked not to forget her old wish, looking at the sunbeam. After all, even the smallest avenger will be able to carry out his revenge, but only in the cold darkness, not in the light. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, the head of the Japanese Hunters Association was not at all in the mood for spiritual revelations. This self-confident guy, resembling a bright brazen rooster, only dreamed of power. He was pleased that the influence of the royal forces was gradually weakening. Japan, from his point of view, had long been his personal kingdom. Yes, the pantheon was intimidating, but the Japanese hunters considered themselves much stronger than the Koreans. Kamiya, the head of the association, already had a plan. He was ready to do anything to eliminate competitors and remain the sole leader. After this great operation, his kingdom was to become perfect. When the Pantheon delegation arrives, they will throw a lavish party so that they will believe that the Japanese are the real leaders. All Japanese delegates were warned in advance. Lion is not just a highborn guest. He should be received as if the emperor himself were arriving. And when the guests got off the plane, it became obvious that this was no exaggeration. The Lion King impressed not only with his elegance, but also with his true grandeur. He was a figure you would not find among modern monarchs. He did not just wear a crown, he was its embodiment. He was met by the Japanese Prime Minister himself, and even that seemed insufficient. However, the leader's conversation was suddenly interrupted. Kamiya appeared, and from the first word he began to criticize his own government, trying to present himself as the only worthy leader. He smugly extended his hand to His Majesty. However, the Lion King is not one to touch commoners without reason. He coldly ordered this rooster to be taken away. However, another one intervened, an S-rank hunter. The young man was clearly angry at seeing how rudely his leader had been treated. However, Lion was not required to know all the famous common people, even those of rank S. He subtly hinted, if a dog behaves rudely, it is not its fault. It is the owner's fault. And it is the owner who should be responsible for this. Everyone around was speechless. No one could even imagine how to react to what had just happened. However, the skirmish was interrupted. The situation suddenly escalated. An urgent message has arrived. The wandering demon sword has just been spotted. Its owner, like a thunderstorm, flew right over the sea, riding this cursed artifact. At that moment, John Ji-ho tore apart space. A portal opened in front of him. Several sea monsters burst out of it at once. He needed John Soyeon, and he assembled an entire underwater hell to take her away. The news of the Dragon Palace gate being breached instantly stunned everyone. According to preliminary data, as soon as the demon sword entered the portal, it immediately released monsters. The hunters refused to believe it. It seemed impossible. However, Leon only coldly objected. If the system allows, the portal can be opened artificially. The president of the Hunters Association immediately demanded a full report. Beatrice and Jack Spiner took up the case. They told how it all started 4 weeks ago, when they first encountered the system while clearing the gate with the Americans. Already then, doubts arose. The tasks she was giving were too suspicious. Then they realized the gates do not just appear. They can be induced artificially. However, whatever the truth, everyone now had one goal: to stop the demon sword's breakthrough. The problem was that the artifact and its carrier were too strong. The operation to neutralize Mech has officially begun. The plan was simple. 3 main interception groups were to take up positions in different cities. The Korean side had already warned about the landing of the monsters and the sword itself. They appeared to be attacked from the air. That is when contact was lost. However, the most alarming situation was with the team of Takita, the same Japanese hunter. They could not get in touch. Something terrible was happening in the area where they were. Even the cameras did not have time to record anything. However, some of the fragments made it clear. One of the monsters had been torn apart from the inside. It seemed that Yong had infiltrated the creature's body to remain unnoticed during the landing. That is not all. Another battle group was completely destroyed. The situation was rapidly becoming critical. However, once the Korean forces joined the Takita group, the balance of power was balanced. There were enough S and A ranks. It seemed like a chance had appeared. However, then the head of the Phoenix Guild suddenly turned pale. He felt something. A spooky sound, a bunch of metal on asphalt. His heart stopped. From the darkness emerged one who brings only chaos. The Duke of Carnage, Akasha, the swordsman who announced the beginning of the war. His goal was simple, to destroy all life. All the fighters instantly prepared for the attack. They had only felt such unstoppable power from the Lion King himself. Who was this freak? John effortlessly cut down several warriors in one fell swoop. His technique and power were simply beyond the limit. He was supposed to take Takita's blow next, but he was covered in time. The Korean fighter hit him with a hammer. Then a jet of fire hit. This was enough to distract John a little. However, he easily repelled the attack with just one hand and even managed to throw in the fact that his opponent was weak. The situation seemed hopeless until the first sword of Korea appeared. His skills saved everyone. Although they had already seen strong opponents, this time was completely different. The opponent was simply a monster. Furthermore, the wounds left by the demonic sword were not treatable. The buffs that strengthened the enemy were on par with Archdemon Rakshara, or perhaps even superior to him. John Jinsu understood well the only way out was to kill the bastard. It was then that Akasha recognized him as a relative. He asked where his granddaughter had gone. These words only fueled hatred in the first sword. The old man proclaimed that his son would die that day at the hands of his own father. The blade of light courage reawakened the strength in the warriors. However, Akasha, the demon's puppet, was not going to give in. He summoned his sword of miscellany. Now the old man was facing real death. At this time, the plane with the Pantheon cadets was already flying to the epicenter of the events. Tension was mounting. Miss Jong was especially nervous. Was she ready for such a meeting? However, fate did not give her time to think. The plane shook violently. The flash of the sword of various Akashis simply burst through the sky. The evil force revealed its true essence. However, this story could not just end like that. At the most crucial moment, someone intervened in the fight. It was John Soyeon, determined to protect her grandfather. Finally, the Avenger entered the battle, and with the strength of the soul that supported him, his power only grew. John believed she could handle the power of her enemy. Her attacks seemed clumsy, but the power of God burned within her, and it was she who forced her opponent to be on his guard, even for a moment. Yet to the bearer of the demonic sword she remained worthless, an ordinary child, unworthy of attention. The Knights of the Pantheon immediately rushed to protect the girl. However, before they could get close, the unexpected happened. A wave of blood swept across the field and knocked everyone off their feet. None of them survived. The warrior with the demonic sword considered all mortals fools who did not understand their doom, considering himself the immortal master of life and death. However, suddenly a roar of laughter broke the silence. It was the leader of the Phoenix Guild. He found it ridiculous that anyone could still consider themselves superior to others. He saw nothing special about this self-proclaimed immortal, especially next to the figure standing directly in front of him. Next to someone who did not recognize any exceptions. Before King Lionheart, everyone was equal, all mortals. This moment awakened an old legend. The world was once one. There existed a great kingdom under the protection of the gods with knights who faithfully served the higher powers. However, his existence haunted the demons who decided to destroy him. Then 4 of the 7 lords of chaos came to Earth. Their appearance led to the destruction of most of the world. Only 2 people survived, the orcs who took the war as a holiday, and the knights who united into a common army for the last battle. During the final battle, Akash was torn from reality. He never found out how it all ended. However, very soon he had to realize how much luck it was for him. Lion did not need much preparation. His first blow was so powerful, which threw the demon sword's wielder away like a soulless toy. The first sword of Korea could not believe how strong this man was. However, the enemy, even after falling, was not going to give up. He laughed at the efforts of mortals and showered insults, claiming that it was all in vain. A multitude of buffs were instantly applied, similar to those that once belonged to Archdemon Rakshar. However, Lion did not let the darkness break him. His steps became symbols of resistance. Even the ground he walked on remained cleansed of evil. No one could deny that a hero from legends stood before them. The one who was not afraid of evil, the one who was ready to fight to the end, and only his holy sword could match the power of Akashi himself. His blows sparkled with light in the very midst of the darkness, and every movement was like a signal that hope was still alive. The Knights of the Holy Grail went on a long journey, and only after its completion were they chosen by God himself. Each was given 3 sacred relics: armor, weapons, and, most importantly, the Holy Sword. However, it was this last relic that had special power. She was not just a weapon. She became the guardian of the Grail. Only those who received the title of Lionheart and attained the status of a demigod had the right to guard this shrine. King Lion was not the embodiment of the power of the gods. He was their leader, the bearer of divine will. His sword, the sword of the Lionheart, was forged by the god Hido himself, tempered in the fires of Thethos, and its blade consumed by the light of the goddess Ariana. All the gods of the pantheon blessed this weapon, which was called the Sword of the Northern Lights. Akasha understood. Although he was standing before an ordinary person, he needed to be destroyed as quickly as possible before Lion had time to reveal his true potential. However, His Majesty's glory has long since become immortal, and his power worthy of the gods themselves. A single blow turned the demon into a pitiful shadow. He roared angrily, claiming that the king had weakened and was no longer equal to the terrible power he once possessed. Akasha knew the reason. There were too few believers on this earth. Lion did not deny this, but he believed that even the remnant of strength he had left was enough to destroy a being like Akasha. Despite the king's temporary weakness, the demon still had no advantage over him. Anger bubbled within the creature. It could not bear such humiliation, so without hesitation it rushed into the attack. However, His Majesty was not going to back down. He carefully gathered the remnants of the holy power, as if every crumb was worth the weight of the world. Akasha finally realized that he could not defeat his enemy alone. Lion was also surprised why there were not any of his monsters next to the demon yet. But this pause did not last long. Very soon an entire army appeared. Lion was not going to let Akasha escape again. The demon regretted only one thing. If he had had a little more time to accumulate strength, he could have turned this entire world into a haven for demons. However, there was no more chance. Sir Spinner struck at once at the entire enemy mass, destroying everything in his path. Beatrice turned to nature, calling down lightning bolts that struck enemies from the heavens. Hari and his own squad were already standing ready to clear the battlefield to the last monster. Akasha was furious. 4 months ago, the hunchback had confirmed the existence of Lionheart, but the demon could not understand how this man had been able to gather an army in such a short time. However, His Majesty had no doubt that the time had come to destroy all enemies. In the end, what they feared happened. The demon sword was able to escape. Although the cadets, who had just been knighted, were also filled with fighting spirit, they were able to easily deal with the demon sword monsters, but they were unable to stop Akasha from reaching the gate. However, His Majesty had already prepared a plan in case the demon escaped. The king prematurely cut off the hand of the Grand Duke of Miscellany. With this, Beatrice will open the portal, and evil will realize that they will get him even in the lair. The king and Clarola's laughter, tinged with hatred, sounded terrible. The party in honor of the great victory began this evening. Most of the cadets were having fun in the main hall. However, Yeonso-yan was sad on the balcony. The girl thought about her father's words, and that this was not the end. Vasantis agreed that this was only the beginning, but this enemy was beyond Zhong's control. Akashi had incredible abilities, and compared to him, the girl was weak. However, there is a way out even when strength is not enough. John said that she has nothing more to give to God. Vasantis tricked the girl into not having to pay if she killed the archdemon. Unexpectedly, Lion intervened in the conversation and ordered the girl to be released. He warned that any force that could force her to deviate from the righteous path could be costly. However, that did not mean Miss Sohan had to give up on revenge. Lion asked her to think about who he was, who was called the Avenger of the Gods. Vasantis confirmed and advised Jun to follow in the king's footsteps. After all, this man lost his people, his comrades, his country, and his flock. It is he who desires revenge more than anyone, and Lion lived only for revenge. He fought alone for 200 years to avenge everything he had lost. It was Lion who was the great avenger who achieved an impossible victory. The Magonist was not going to forbid John from taking revenge. On the contrary, he approved of it. Sohan did not understand why then. Lion said that revenge is sweet, but it must be pursued in cold blood. If John dedicates himself solely to revenge, it will eat away at her soul. His Majesty asked directly who she wanted revenge on, her father who killed her mother and friend, or herself for being chosen by the demon sword. The girl started crying and saying that she was the cause of all the troubles. However, the target could have been the victim, not the perpetrator. Besides, she could not even choose a target for revenge properly. John wondered if she really should have killed the archdemon. This was the right way to take revenge. 10 days later, the Pantheon gathered again to attack the demon. The Japanese warrior Tuakete was curious to see His Majesty in battle. However, something crazy was happening inside the gate. After all, the hunters forgot that in front of them was a king from the Middle Ages. However, it is worth remembering the events that occurred a few hours before. When the Legion entered the territory of Grand Duke Riesni, the effectiveness of all abilities decreased by 80%. His Majesty maintained his imperturbable calm for a reason. The protagonist managed to spread his buffs to thousands of warriors. Finally, a task for this portal also appeared. This time they became part of King Lionheart's legion pursuing Duke Akashi. For the first time, the guest's purpose and mission completely coincided. The king ordered to explore the surrounding areas, as this was their first visit to the demon's domain. Meanwhile, the yacht spinner had already received intelligence data. The drone had recorded a large number of settlements where hostile creatures were likely living. The order was simple, to go to the nearest one immediately. However, getting inside was not so easy. The village headmen recognized Lionheart and instantly hid behind a high fence. The yacht spinner quickly cleared their path. Lion wanted to know why the elder was so frightened. Unexpectedly, the god Thedos turned to the king. He recognized this man as the former commander-in-chief of the imperial army who became a follower of the demon Varius. This news angered the king. All the inhabitants of the village were captured, after which interrogation began. It turned out that the elder received immortality in exchange for loyalty to the demon. For years they carried out all the orders and whims of these creatures. The man begged the king for mercy, claiming that a demon had tricked them. However, Lion did not believe these excuses. He believed that there must be punishment for any sin. So until Tatar, the god of judgment, delivers the final verdict, all residents will be slaves for 50 years. By serving the gods, they will be able to at least partially purify their souls. This rule applied to everyone without exception, and the slaves carried out the king's orders without question. The headman was the one who put up the most fierce resistance, but even the goddess remained indifferent to his words. That is why, when an army of demons approached the Lionheart Legion, a harsh decision was made. All 5,000 new slaves will come forward as human shields. Although these people did not want to follow orders, they themselves accepted the punishment, and now they had no freedom until 50 years of slavery had passed. The demons did not expect to see their former allies among their enemies. However, the slaves, like madmen, rushed into battle without fear. The Lionheart Vanguard had a vitality boost of as much as 2,250%, so the human shield proved to be a fairly effective tactical move. King Lion, meanwhile, was already rushing forward, ruthlessly destroying the demons. The battle went easily, and the Pantheon Legion destroyed 3,200 enemies. In addition, prisoners were taken, demons that Queen Beatrice planned to use to open even more demonic gates and continue the purge. The Japanese also wanted to take a few demons as a reward for participating in the battle. His Majesty sincerely appreciated their help, but refused. He could not be sure that people would not succumb to the temptation of the dark force. However, after a brief exchange of glances with Beatrice, he still agreed to hand over the three creatures. Lion chose one demon who immediately began praising Akasha, but just one blow from the king and the creature could only drool mindlessly. These actions had a clear goal: to break the demonic essence, to make them safe for humans, so that in the future these creatures could be used without risk. Meanwhile, the essence of Grand Duke Rizni was hiding and hiding. He never received a response to his request for reinforcements. The so-called allies believed that Akasha had no right to do so. The demon was outraged by the behavior of the Orc Khan, and his wounds healed extremely slowly. And all because of Lionheart. Akashi ordered them to come up with something, but it sounded as if the true owner of the body was trying to break out. The demon understood he needed a new ideal body with exceptional potential, and such a person was Jang Soyan. Even during the party, His Majesty advised Miss Sohn to take more care of her health and prepared a small gift for her. It was a special earring created by Queen Beatrice for all the cadets. Thanks to magic, the ornament could create a mental shield that protected the mind from demonic influence. After all, many demons had the ability to manipulate consciousness. Lion warned Jiang if she lost, the evil being would take over her body, and then His Majesty would have to destroy her. However, the girl was determined. This time she would completely trust the king. The plan was simple: break through the portal. Everyone was supposed to follow only Lion. The fiery spear of light flew swiftly towards the demon's castle. The Grand Duke was pleased with the arrival of the guests. He could already taste Soen's flesh and blood. It was the only thing that could change the situation in his favor. Akasha ordered his subordinate to buy him 5 minutes. And it was at this moment that poor Soen was attacked. She was confused. The enemy forces were too powerful. He sought to possess her body to become even stronger. However, suddenly another voice sounded in the girl's head and told her to run. For a moment, Jiang felt that her father had helped her, at least for a few seconds. However, escape was impossible. Akasha, having taken possession of her body, began to laugh like a madman. He was overwhelmed with admiration for the perfection of the new medium, how incredibly talented this girl was. However, despite the euphoria, the demon lost the stability of his essence. He urgently needed to escape. However, no one will allow him to do this. His Majesty has already found Akasha, and he was going to destroy the parasite immediately. A new shocking clash unfolded. The king and the demon fought almost on equal terms. It was not for nothing that Akasha was so eager to obtain this body. However, none of his attacks could penetrate Lionheart's perfect defense. The king only laughed louder. Before him was a true parasite, one who had collected all the sword techniques but had not perfected any of them. Lion realized more and more with each passing minute how pitiful this creature was. Akasha even stole the demon's sword's weaknesses. However, now justice was inevitable. Akasha tried to manipulate. He begged not to kill him because he was still in that girl's body. The demon could not understand who this monster was standing before him. However, the answer was simple. Not a monster, but King Lionheart. Lion destroyed the earring given to Beatrice. At that very moment, the Grand Duke of Miscellany unexpectedly found himself in some unknown space, bound in strong chains. Now the demon stood before the two gods of the Pantheon. Byzantius was pleased his avenger had kept his promise. Only at that moment did Akasha realize why the girl had allowed her body to be taken over. John knew from the very beginning that the moment of reckoning would come. She quietly asked for her body back. She was disgusted with being around this monster. However, Akasha was not going to give up. He screamed, begging Miss Sohan to release him, convincing her that he could give her incredible destructive power. John silently approached, and it seemed a demon that the girl had succumbed to a spell, but she simply punched him so hard that the demon flew away. The gods just smiled, proud of their little disciple. In response, Akasha began to insult her, assuring her that nothing would come of it, and she would never achieve anything. However, he had to pay dearly for these words. John finally drove the demon away to a place from where he could never return. Then, after everything, what everyone had been waiting for began. Good news. Father John finally woke up. He could not believe he was seeing his daughter again. All the nightmares were behind them, and now they could just live. The man understood he had to find a way to atone for all his sins. The first step is to accept faith in the Pantheon and offer help to the Lion King. However, Soonli blushed in embarrassment and replied that it was not necessary. She had already been chosen by God and even received power in exchange for the soul of an archdemon. However, my father should have returned to the guild and become its new leader. The man was proud. His daughter had grown up and done so extremely quickly. Meanwhile, His Majesty was having a conversation with the First Sword of Korea. Lion intended to see the matter through to the end. Chon's body still retained the fighting skills of the previous archdemon carriers, and purifying his soul would not be easy. The elder sincerely thanked His Majesty. Lionheart saved the entire swordsman's family, and for the sake of this light grandfather was ready for anything. The king advised him to go to the Pantheon. However, Lion himself had one more important matter to attend to. Giant with the help of fortress traps. A few days after defeating Grand Duke Rezini, Hari and the new knights of the kingdom received their first mission. Their task was to try to catch the giants with the help of serfs. Of course, there were many doubts in the eyes of the students, but such a thing simply could not be based on the logic they used on Earth. Before the exam begins, His Majesty will demonstrate everything. Now I will tell you what it all led to. Everything was based on Sir Gratus's theory, which His Majesty received in paradise. For the Lion King, it was absolutely clear who would doubt it. They will be able to kill the giant if each serf inflicts 6 blows on him. The slaves quickly realized that they might simply be wanted to be killed. One of them seemed to have gone mad. He did not want to dance to Lion's tune. Additionally, all serfs were given a buff that made them 20% stronger. However, this slave did not even have time to use this power before he was simply crushed by the giant. He could not withstand the powerful blow, and his body remained on the ground. However, one important detail emerged. The attack power increased sharply by 0.001%. His Majesty understood immediately. This 20% meant that the giants had absorbed the blood of 200,000 people. Sir Gratos had left them a real treasure. Now all that remained was to explain to the serfs what the whole point was. It was simple. They had to either die or kill the giant, and the giant was finally defeated. His Majesty was pleased with this sacred book. However, something was bothering Harry. The girl said that the serfs were given a chance to atone for their sins. However, was it worth so many deaths? Lion agreed because the gods like such pure thoughts. However, he knew Lionheart's retainers were not human. He understood that this did not convince Hari. The king ordered one of the slaves to come and tell about all his sins. The man confessed to killing his husband and raping his entire family. He dissected his victims, corpses, and sacrificed living people. He enjoyed all this because he was a servant of the demon. Even though these people could have lived righteously, they still did just that. So, you should not be soft on them. However, there was only one reason to give these people a chance to atone for their sins. They are not demons. The next stage was as follows. Each knight was allocated 500 serfs, and the one who kills the giant with the fewest losses will become the captain of the knights. Jong So-yan did the best, and she was appointed captain of the knights. Khan passed this exam the worst, but his faith in the god of Ariana was not quite suitable for such a task. However, he had a talent for sending slaves to hell, so he was allocated another 500 serfs. Lionheart's laughter echoed within the walls of the Pantheon for a long time. Let us return to the Pantheon. One issue worried His Majesty. the sapling he received from Gulnar had stopped growing. The goddess knew how difficult it was to raise the child of the forest sage. However, the problem was not the quality of the land, but the level of saturation of this world with divine power. His Majesty decided to use his own magic, and it immediately became clear that it was not a matter of lack of strength, but of its quality. Although Lion possessed the divine power of many gods, the growth of the shoot occurred solely by chance. The protagonist decided to return to paradise and meet with his friends to learn more. However, the goddess asked him not to do this. It will not bring anything good for a living person to be in the world of the dead. Although Lion assured him that he would cope, if Zaria offered him a drink and Roxy wanted to duel, could the king refuse his precious memories? The first visit can be short, the second longer, and during the third you will want to stay there for a long time. Therefore, unless absolutely necessary, it is better not to return to paradise. His Majesty remembered the words of the Great Mother well. After this conversation, Lion met Beatrice. The queen noticed that he had been checking on the seedlings a lot lately. She wondered what kind of power the seedlings that Lion was so eager to grow possessed. In fact, everything was simple. The sages gave a sapling of a sacred tree, which in the future would become the heart of the forest. This tree is necessary for the temple of the goddess Man, the patroness of forests and trees. When this virgin descends to earth, a deity will come with her before whom no demon will stand. Beatrice pondered the fact that the power of the deity depended not only on the heavens, but also on the tree itself. Just like the lion's heart, the sacred tree produces its own divine power. It is precisely because of his ability to purify evil that demons cannot even come close to him. The queen finally realized how important it was to grow this sapling, and she had one proven method. She prepared an entire procession with the help of crystals and special spells. A powerful magic circle was created. Once the sapling was placed in the center, Her Majesty began the ritual. A portal of incredible beauty appeared right in front of her. For the first time, people saw the gate without color. It seemed either white or completely transparent. Lion immediately felt an incredible energy, and it was clear. You need to be very careful with this portal. Only a small group of knights consisting of the best will go there to investigate. The protagonist asked everyone to be as attentive and careful as possible. However, as soon as the entrance was completed, something dangerous began. The gate anomaly has manifested itself again. The reason was not accidental. The portal is forbidden to let in a double, and that is exactly why Lion could not get in. The heroes found themselves in a new, still unknown place. Harry wanted to ask His Majesty where exactly they had been taken, but the king was not around. This immediately alarmed Beatrice. Lion's disappearance was not just disturbing, but critically dangerous. It seems His Majesty was unable to pass through the gate. The knights did not understand what exactly had happened, so they planned to return and check if everything was okay. However, suddenly a strange cold voice came from the sky. Someone outside was clearly interested in the portal. The unknown person said he would not allow them to interfere with a mission that he himself considered too dangerous for outsiders. The knights warned the queen the gate was about to disappear. Beatrice quickly decided it was time to retreat. This place was already occupied by others, and the magic that reigned here was beyond her control. It seems they had gotten into something much more serious. Even Sir Spinar, usually hypersensitive to energy, could not pick up on anything. When the portal finally collapsed, the first panicked thoughts began to appear among the knights. Everyone understood that things were bad. Then it got even worse. In some inexplicable way, the heroes found themselves right in front of a giant army of monsters. The knights did not hesitate and immediately began to retreat, their horses at full speed. Beatrix's strength was almost exhausted. Almost all of her mana had gone into supporting the portal. Meanwhile, the number of enemies grew. Monsters appeared from all sides, surrounding them from all directions. The knights dreamed of only one thing, that His Majesty Lion was nearby now. Sir Spinner did his best, using his entire arsenal to hold back the onslaught, but there were too many of them. The situation seemed hopeless. However, at the last moment, everything changed. Someone unknown destroyed the enemies in just a few moves. The fighters used techniques that belonged only to Lionheart. The heroes understood that they were not ordinary warriors. These were the Knights of the Holy Grail. They were led by the legendary warrior Gillian, a servant of the god Ultima. Thanks to their appearance, the Knights of the Pantheon found themselves in a safe place. The leader of the new squad wanted to know who was standing in front of him. He immediately felt that Sir Spinner was radiating the energy of the god of iron and fire himself. Beatrice explained that they had come from the borderlands and were delayed because of a demon, and now she needed to understand what had happened in this strange place. As it turned out, the situation was simple and at the same time dangerous. Sir Vulcanius had disappeared, and now the battles were fought right in the markets. King Lionheart fought against various races, gathering the remnants of his troops to form a unified army. Then Beatrice realized that they had entered Lion's world at the very moment when the wave of demons was at its peak. The knights realized that this place was too dangerous, and their mission still remained unknown. The very next day, they finally reached His Majesty's castle. A view opened up before them that amazed everyone, a real pantheon which none of them had seen before. Yes, there really was a Lion King in this world. However, this was a completely different lion, the one they were not yet familiar with. Well, let us get back to the events inside the portal. All of this happened in the 60th year of His Majesty's reign. It was then that a demonic lord named Malas first appeared. The empire, like the kingdom, was literally mired in chaos. Many of the Knights of the Holy Grail then departed into the afterlife, and there is no need to speak of the number of ordinary people who died. A few years later, winter began when the second invasion of demons took place. It was the 66th year. The empire fell, the elven forest burned to the ground. The dwarven mountains turned into ruins, and the southern celestial kingdom collapsed under the pressure of the forces of darkness. The entire territory of the kingdom suffered a catastrophe. 90% of the land was destroyed. However, despite everything, His Majesty was not going to give up. It was during this period that our Knights of the Pantheon arrived at him. An important question arose before them. What to do next? Beatrice remembered Sir Gillenorm's words. The king would be returning from battle very soon, and by then they had to complete their first task, to find the wise men of the forest and learn from them about the sprouts of Gunler. Sir Spinner took charge of gathering information and developing the plan. Meanwhile, Hari was advised to join the work with the other knights. However, things did not go according to plan. She was quickly chased away because she turned out to be a priestess. So the girl decided to go to the temple that stood at the very top of the mountain. The poor thing had no idea what a difficult climb awaited her. However, suddenly an elegant carriage stopped next to her. Inside sat a wondrous beauty. Her radiance felt almost as much as that of the king himself. The girl turned to Hari. That is how she ended up in a carriage that took her straight to the temple. This stranger was called Anak. She was a servant of the goddess Ariana. Their conversation was light and warm, and soon the girls were already going up to the temple. Before them was a real pantheon, a place about which legends were spread. What was most surprising was that Anak turned out to be a great saint. Harry was so shocked that she almost fell to her knees, begging for forgiveness. However, Anak was not offended. She had only one request for her new friend. Together they went to the Abbess Isabella to prepare for the great consecration in honor of His Majesty, who was just returning in victory. Harry already guessed that the meeting with King Lion was closer than it seemed. Then the news came. King Lion-Heart had arrived. As soon as the gate opened, Hari froze. She did not recognize him. Before her was a completely different lion, not so joyful and friendly, but rather wild, full of unspeakable fear. His Majesty literally radiated death as sticky as pitch. It was not just power, it was his nature, for he was the apostle of death. Without going into details, let us just say that the king immediately headed to a special hall. Everything was ready there for the dedication ceremony. The protagonist from the past plunged into the font. He needed to wash away his suffering and blood. Suddenly, the silence of the hall was shattered by thunder. Karina, the commander of the Northern Army, entered. However, she was also the legitimate Duchess of the Grand Duché, and most importantly, the daughter of the King of Leon himself. Lion could not understand why Karina suddenly appeared. His daughter was not used to taking unnecessary steps, so there was clearly a good reason for this appearance. And she did not delay for long. She simply stated head-on that the Northern Army was withdrawing from the ranks of the Allied forces. The king, of course, refused. His Majesty could not even entertain the thought of such a thing. The North was the backbone of the entire alliance, its support. However, Karina was not going to back down. The capital lay in ruins. The continent was falling apart. The enemy had a 10 million strong army of monsters and demons. Every day there were more of them. She looked her father in the eyes and asked simply, "Was there even one chance left to win?" Lion did not answer directly. He just asked coldly, "What is her real problem?" Karina clenched her fists. She could not erase the death of her loved ones from her memory. Even if she is unable to destroy all the demons, she must take revenge. The king was a little confused. Did his daughter really blame him for this? Does she really think he made a mistake by destroying hordes of demons instead of defending the Grand Duchy? However, everything was different. He fulfilled his duty as a monarch. Karina acted not as a strategist, but as a daughter who had lost everything. She lifted her collar and showed the proof, the clear burning sign of the agreement. Lion was speechless. His own daughter is a holy grail knight of the god of darkness and vengeance Byzantius. The entire army of the north swore allegiance to this force. He did not know what hurt more, the betrayal or her calm gaze. His Majesty did not want to hear anything more. He ordered Karina to leave the Pantheon. However, it was clear to him that it was too late. The choice had been made. The road back was closed. Karina was lost. The great feast has already begun. The purification ritual has once again focused attention on the lion heart. However, suddenly the king looked around and noticed a strange stranger whom he had not seen before. His voice broke the silence. "Who is she?" However, there was still no answer. At this same time, other knights of the Holy Grail were operating throughout the Pantheon. Sir Spinner arranged a secret observation. One of the workshops caught his attention. That is how he ended up in the forge. As soon as he crossed the threshold, the blacksmith immediately felt a strange presence. It seemed that now he would simply be wiped off the face of the earth. However, Spinner showed in time what he was capable of, and this forced the blacksmith to change his anger to interest. This stern man recognized Spinner as not just a spy, but a true servant of the gods. The knight himself finally understood who was in front of him. The Knight of the Grail, the master of iron and anvil, Ant himself. His fame went before him. Meanwhile, Harry returned to the cadet barracks. Everyone was on their feet. Everyone had received some important news that could affect the future. Divine energy literally pierced space. It was too powerful to ignore. Then there was silence, heavy, ominous. It seemed as if the very air had frozen. A giant tree suddenly threw their tent into the sky. At that moment, swords were pointed at the cadets. Everything happened in a flash. Roxley, the head magistrate of the kingdom, appeared before them. His eyes were burning, and it was he who pronounced the sentence, "All sinners must receive punishment."